My daughter took me to a wellness spa for a relaxing day together. When she stepped away to take a call, the receptionist spilled water on me, grabbed my arm until her nails dug into my skin and whispered, "Don't sign anything." They killed the last old man who sat in that chair. Run. I escaped through a bathroom vent and went home to find my locks changed and my life sold. But what my daughter and her husband didn't know was that the helpless old man they tried to bury had buried something first, something that would destroy them. Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe if you believe that family loyalty should never be blind. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. My name is Lucius Coleman. I am 72 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer. My job was to look at a building and see the stress points, the fractures, the hidden weaknesses that could bring the whole thing crashing down. I spent my life ensuring things were solid. I built a good life. I built a home. I built a family. But as I sat in the waiting room of the Serenity Wellness Center, I realized I had missed the most dangerous structural failure of all, the one in my own bloodline. The lobby was aggressively opulent. There was gold leaf on the crown molding and marble floors that were polished to a mirror shine. The air was thick with the smell of synthetic lavender pumped in through the vents to mask the sterile scent of something chemical underneath. It was supposed to be relaxing, but my engineer's brain was already analyzing the room. There were no windows. The main entrance was a double glass door secured by a magnetic lock system, the kind you see in high-security data centers or prisons, not spas. To leave, you needed a key card or a code from behind the desk. Nia, my 35-year-old daughter, sat next to me. She was vibrating with nervous energy. She kept checking her phone, tapping the screen with a manicured fingernail. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked. Her voice pitched a little too high. "You look tense. This is going to be so good for you. Gavin says this place does miracles for circulation." Gavin, my white son-in-law, the real estate developer who hadn't developed anything but debt in the last 5 years. Just hearing his name made my jaw tighten. "I am fine, Nia," I said, keeping my voice level. "I just don't like fancy places. You know that." "It is a gift, Daddy," she insisted, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. "Just accept the gift." Her phone buzzed. She jumped. "I have to take this," she said, standing up too quickly. "It is the office. I will be right back. Just relax. The doctor will be out in a second." She walked away toward the corridor, her heels clicking on the marble. She didn't go outside to take the call. She went deeper into the facility. I watched her go. I noticed she didn't look back at me once. Not a wave, not a smile. She just walked away fast, like she was leaving a package at a drop-off point. I was alone in the room except for the receptionist behind the high marble counter. She was a young black woman, maybe 25, with her hair in tight braids and a name tag that read Keisha. She had her head down, typing furiously, but I saw her eyes dart up to look at me. It wasn't a welcoming look. It was a look of pure fear. Before I could analyze that, the double doors behind the desk opened. A man in a pristine white coat stepped out. He was tall, with a smile that showed too many teeth and eyes that looked like dead sharks. "Mr. Coleman," he boomed, extending a hand that felt cold and damp. "I am Dr. Aris. Welcome to Serenity. We are so honored to have you." I stood up, my knees popping slightly. I shook his hand. It was limp. "My daughter said this was a massage and a sauna." I said, "Oh, it is much more than that, doctor," Aris said, guiding me toward a small glass table in the corner of the waiting room. "We offer a comprehensive rejuvenation package. But first, just some standard liability paperwork. You know how the lawyers are." He placed a stack of documents on the table. It was thick, at least 30 pages. "We are a bit behind schedule," Dr. Aris said, tapping the top page with a gold pen. "If you could just initial here and sign the back, we can get you into the VIP suite immediately. The sauna is already heated." I sat down and put on my reading glasses. I didn't pick up the pen. I picked up the first page. I always read what I sign. "Doctor," I said. Dr. Aris let out a short, impatient laugh. Of course. But it is really just standard boilerplate. Consent to treat waiver of liability for slips and falls. Boring stuff. Nia already reviewed it. "Nia is not the one signing it," I said. I started reading. The first page was standard. But as I flipped to page 3, the language changed. It wasn't about massages. It was about medical competency. I scanned down to paragraph 4. The text was dense, single-spaced, meant to be skimmed over. But words jumped out at me. voluntary commitment, indefinite observation, assignment of power of attorney for medical decisions to the provider. This wasn't a waiver for a hot stone massage. This was a legal document surrendering my rights to the facility. I looked up at Dr. Aris. He was watching me closely, a bead of sweat tracking down his temple despite the freezing air conditioning. "This says I am consenting to be admitted for psychiatric observation," I said, my voice low. "It is a standard clause for our stress management program," he said quickly, his smile tightening. "Many of our elderly clients have confusion. It just allows us to keep you safe if you have an episode." "I don't have episodes," I said. "I am a retired engineer. I do the Sunday crossword in ink." "Doctor," Aris leaned in, his voice dropping an octave, losing its fake warmth. "Mr. Coleman, your daughter has already paid for the non-refundable platinum package. It would be a shame to waste her money because you are being difficult. Just sign the paper." He pushed the pen toward me. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a command. I looked at the door. The magnetic lock was glowing red. I looked at the hallway where Nia had disappeared. I was 72. I was strong for my age, but Dr. Aris was 40 and heavy-set. And there was a security guard standing by the elevator, now a man with a neck as wide as a tree trunk. I felt the walls closing in. This was a setup. A well-constructed, expensive trap. I reached for the pen, my mind racing, calculating escape routes. I needed to stall. Suddenly there was a crash. Keisha, the receptionist, had come around the desk carrying a pitcher of water and a glass. She tripped on the rug and the pitcher went flying. Ice water soaked the front of my shirt and splashed all over the contract. "Oh my God, I am so clumsy," Keisha cried out, dropping to her knees. "I am so sorry, sir. I am so sorry." She grabbed a towel from her cart and started scrubbing my arm aggressively. Dr. Aris groaned in annoyance and stepped back to avoid the water. "You stupid girl," Aris hissed. "Go get fresh papers. Now." But Keisha didn't move away. She gripped my forearm. Her nails dug into my skin, painful and sharp. She leaned her face close to mine, pretending to wipe water off my collar. Her voice was a breath of air against my ear, so quiet I almost missed it. "Don't sign. They killed the last old man who sat in this chair. Mr. Henderson." He signed, and they gave him a shot, and he never woke up. "Run." She pulled back, her eyes wide and terrified, and then scrambled to her feet. "I will get the papers, doctor. I am sorry." She ran back behind the desk. Dr. Aris sighed and wiped a drop of water from his sleeve. "I apologize for the incompetence, Mr. Coleman. Good help is hard to find. Why don't you dry off in the restroom while I print a clean copy?" He pointed to a door down the hall. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Keisha's words rang in my head. "They killed the last one." I stood up, clutching my chest. I didn't have to pretend much. The panic was real. My stomach. I groaned, doubling over. That water. The shock. I need the bathroom. Now. Dr. Aris looked annoyed, but he waved his hand. "Go. Just be quick. We are on a schedule." I shuffled toward the bathroom, dragging my leg a little to look more frail than I was. I needed him to underestimate me. I needed him to see a confused old man, not a structural engineer who was currently calculating the load-bearing capacity of a ventilation duct. I entered the bathroom and locked the door. It was a single room, luxurious with marble tiles and gold fixtures. I turned on the faucet full blast to mask any noise. I looked at the window. It was frosted glass, but it was reinforced with wire mesh and painted shut. No way out. I looked up. The ventilation grate. It was high near the ceiling, about 12 by 18 inches, standard commercial sizing. I didn't have tools. I didn't have time. I took off my leather belt. It had a heavy, solid brass buckle. I stepped onto the toilet lid, praying the ceramic would hold my weight. I reached up. The grate was held in place by 4 Phillips head screws. I jammed the prong of my belt buckle into the first screw. It was too big. I tried the edge of the buckle. It fit into the groove. I twisted. The paint cracked. The screw turned. 1. I heard a knock at the door. "Mr. Coleman," Dr. Aris called out. His voice was right outside. "Are you all right in there?" "Just a minute," I yelled, trying to make my voice sound strained and sick. "My stomach is killing me." 2 screws! My arm was burning. I was sweating, the cold water on my shirt making me shiver. 3 screws. "Mr. Coleman, open this door," Aris said. He sounded suspicious now. I heard the jingle of keys. He had a master key. Of course he did. I spun the fourth screw frantically. It fell into the sink with a clatter. I pulled the grate down. The duct behind it was dark and dusty. I threw my belt around my neck, grabbed the edges of the opening, and pulled. I am 72 years old. I have arthritis in my shoulders. But fear is a powerful lubricant. I hauled myself up, scraping my stomach against the raw metal edge. I kicked my legs, finding purchase on the towel rack, and shoved my upper body into the duct. The bathroom door handle jiggled. Then the lock clicked. I pulled my legs in just as the door swung open. "Mr. Coleman." I held my breath. I was in a horizontal shaft, lying in dust and lint. Through the slats of the grate I had left on the floor, I could see Dr. Eris's shiny shoes. He stepped into the room. He checked the stalls. He looked at the window. Then he looked up. I froze. If he saw the empty hole, he would call security. They would seal the building. But he didn't look at the hole. He looked at the water running in the sink. He cursed loud and ugly. He thinks I slipped out while he was getting the key, I thought. He ran out of the bathroom, shouting for security to check the front door. I didn't wait. I crawled. The duct was tight. The metal screws snagged my clothes. I knew the layout of buildings like this. The bathrooms usually vented to the rear alley to keep odors away from the main entrance. I crawled for what felt like a mile but was probably only 30 feet. I saw light ahead. A grate. I kicked it. It was rusted. It gave way with a screech of metal on metal that sounded like a gunshot in the confined space. I tumbled out, falling about 6 feet onto a pile of damp cardboard boxes and trash bags. I landed hard on my left ankle. Pain shot up my leg, hot and white. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. I rolled off the trash, gasping for air. I was in an alley behind the spa. Ideally, I would have landed on my feet like an action hero. Instead, I was an old man covered in dust and garbage, limping with a twisted ankle. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was Nia. I stared at the screen. My daughter. The girl I taught to ride a bike. The girl I sat up with when she had fevers. The girl whose student loans I paid off in secret so she could start her life debt-free. She was part of this. She had walked me into that trap and left me there to be erased. I answered. "Daddy, where are you?" Her voice was panic, but it wasn't worry for me. It was the panic of a co-conspirator who lost the asset. "The doctor said you ran off." "You are not well, Daddy. You are having an episode. Tell me where you are so we can come get you." I listened to her lie. It was smooth, practiced. "I am not having an episode. Nia," I said, my voice raspy from the dust. "I am having a moment of clarity." "Daddy, stop it. You are confused. Stay right there." I hung up. I didn't just hang up. I turned the phone off, pulled the back case open, and ripped the SIM card out with my trembling fingers. I snapped it in half and threw it into a puddle of dirty water. I limped to the end of the alley. I hailed a cab looking like a madman. The driver hesitated, but I flashed a $100 bill I kept in my shoe for emergencies. "Take me to 424 Oak Street," I said. The drive took 20 minutes. My ankle throbbed with every bump in the road. I tried to think. Why? Why would she do this? I had given her everything. When the taxi pulled up to my house, the house Beatrice and I had bought 40 years ago, the house where we raised Nia, my blood ran cold. There was a white van in the driveway. 2 men were carrying my furniture out, my leather armchair, Beatrice's antique vanity. Gavin was standing on the porch holding a clipboard directing them. He was smiling. He was selling my life while he thought I was being locked away in a padded room. I reached for my house keys, but then I stopped. If they had planned this, the locks would be changed. I couldn't just walk in. I was a fugitive in my own life. I told the driver to keep going. "Drive around the block," I said. "Drop me at the corner." I had to get into my house. I had to get the red box Beatrice had left me. But I couldn't use the front door. I was going to have to break into my own home, and I had to do it before Gavin realized his victim was watching him from the street. The taxi driver handed me his phone after I slid a $20 bill across the seat divider. I needed to make one call. My hands were shaking, covered in the grime of the alleyway, but my mind was sharpening into a weapon. I dialed Nia's number. I had to know the extent of the lie. I had to know if there was any part of my daughter left, or if she had been completely consumed by the greed of the man she married. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was a whisper, hushed and concerned. "Daddy, is that you? The doctor said you ran out. Where are you?" I stared out the window at the passing suburbs, the familiar streets of my neighborhood blurring into a gray smear. "I am in the bathroom." "Nia," I lied. "My stomach. It is bad. Are you still in the waiting room?" There was a pause, a beat of silence that told me everything. "Yes, Daddy," she said. "I am right here sitting in the chair next to where you were. I am waiting for you. Just come out when you are ready." She was lying. The waiting room was empty when I ran. She was not there. She had dropped me off like a bag of unwanted clothes and left before the paperwork was even signed. She was probably halfway to the bank or sitting in her car laughing with Gavin. "Okay," I said. "I will be out soon." I handed the phone back to the driver. My heart felt like a stone sinking into a dark ocean. My daughter was gone. The little girl who used to sit on my lap while I sketched blueprints was dead. In her place was a stranger who could look at her father and see nothing but a dollar sign. The taxi turned onto my street. I told him to stop 3 houses down. I did not want them to see me. I paid the fare and stepped out onto the pavement. My left ankle screamed in protest, a hot lance of pain shooting up my leg with every step. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to walk. I was a structural engineer. I knew how to bear a load. I crept through the neighbor's hedge, thankful that Mrs. Johnson never trimmed her azaleas. I had a clear view of my driveway. The white van I had seen earlier was still there. 2 men I did not recognize were hauling a sofa out the front door. It was my sofa, the leather Chesterfield I had bought for Beatrice on our 30th anniversary. They shoved it into the back of the van with no care, scratching the leather against the metal door frame. I moved closer, staying low, using the shadows of the late afternoon. I reached the side door, the one we always used. I punched my code into the keypad. Access denied. The red light blinked at me like an angry eye. They had not just changed the locks. They had deleted me. I moved to the living room window and peered through the sheer curtains. The room was in chaos. Boxes were stacked everywhere. And there, standing in the center of the room, was Gavin. He was holding a large framed canvas. It was the portrait of Beatrice that we had commissioned in New Orleans years ago. She was smiling in that painting, looking regal and full of life. It was the most precious thing I owned. Gavin looked at the painting. He did not look at her face. He looked at the gilded frame. He pulled a hammer from his belt. With a violent swing, he smashed the canvas. He tore the painted face of my wife apart to separate it from the wood. He wanted the frame. He thought the frame was worth money, and the memory of the woman who built this house was just trash to be discarded. A roar built up in my throat, a sound of pure primal rage. I wanted to smash the window. I wanted to wrap my hands around his neck and squeeze until his eyes popped. I wanted to kill him, but I stopped. I forced the air into my lungs. If I went in there now, injured and unarmed, he would finish what the doctor started. He would call the police. He would say I was violent. He would say I was crazy. And with the papers they had forged, the law would believe him. I had to be smarter. I had to be the engineer. I had to find the weakness in his structure. I backed away from the window. I went around to the back of the house. The yard was overgrown, the grass high. I limped toward the foundation. When I built this house in 1990, I designed it with a raised foundation to account for the floodplain. I also built in a redundant access point for the plumbing and electrical systems, a crawl space. The entry was hidden behind the lattice work of the back porch, right behind the old generator I had not used in years. I pulled the lattice panel loose. It groaned a rusty sound that seemed too loud in the quiet yard. I froze listening. Inside the house, the thumping of heavy footsteps continued. They did not hear me. I squeezed my body through the opening. The space was dark and smelled of damp earth and old wood. I turned on the flashlight of the burner phone I had taken from Beatrice's red box. The beam cut through the dust motes, dancing in the stagnant air. I had to crawl. There was only about 3 feet of clearance. I dragged my bad leg, wincing as my knees ground into the dirt. Spider webs brushed against my face, sticky and cold. I ignored them. I focused on the map of the house in my head. I needed to get to the vent that opened into the utility closet off the kitchen. It was the only one big enough for a man to fit through. I crawled under the living room floorboards. I could hear them walking above me, the heavy thud of work boots, the scrape of furniture being dragged. It sounded like an invasion. Then I heard Gavin's voice. It was clear, resonating through the wood and the ductwork. He was right above me. "Yeah, it is done," Gavin said. He sounded breathless, excited. "The old man is at the facility. Nia dropped him off an hour ago." I stopped moving. I held my breath. "No, do not worry about the signature," Gavin continued. "I have a guy for that. Just bring the cash. Tonight. I am clearing the house out now. We sell the contents today. We sell the house next week." He laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "He is not coming back. He is cooked. His brain is mush. The doctor gave him a cocktail that will keep him drooling for a month. By the time he wakes up, if he wakes up, he will be homeless and indigent. I lay in the dirt, my hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles ached. He was selling my life for parts. He had planned this down to the hour. The money, Gavin said, 200,000. Bring it to the house. I will give you the deed to the south lot as collateral until the sale goes through. The south lot. That was the land Beatrice and I had bought for our retirement. He was trading it for quick cash to a loan shark or a fence. I started crawling again. Faster. Anger was a fuel burning hot in my veins. I reached the section of the floor under the utility closet. I found the panel I had installed. It was secured with wing nuts, not screws, because I knew that one day I might need to get in here quickly to fix a burst pipe. I never imagined I would use it to break into my own home. I twisted the nuts. They were stiff with age, but they turned. 1, 2, 3, 4. I pushed the panel up. It lifted. I slid it aside. Light flooded into the crawl space. I listened. The house was quiet in this section. The movers were in the front. I pulled myself up. My ankle throbbed a dull, constant agony. I rolled onto the linoleum floor of the closet and quietly pushed the panel back into place. I stood up. I was inside. I cracked the closet door. The kitchen was empty. I stepped out. The house felt different. It felt cold. The soul of it was being stripped away. On the kitchen island, amidst a pile of takeout containers and beer bottles, sat a stack of papers. I walked over to them. The top document was on heavy legal bond paper. It had the seal of the county court. Emergency order for temporary guardianship. It listed me, Lucius Coleman, as the ward. It listed Gavin Sterling as the guardian. The reason for the order was typed in bold letters: advanced dementia, aggressive behavior, risk of self-harm. There was a signature at the bottom. It looked like Dr. Sterling's signature, but I knew Dr. Sterling. He was a good man. He would never sign this. Then I looked closer. It wasn't Dr. Sterling. It was Dr. Aris from the spa. He had signed an affidavit stating he had examined me and found me to be mentally incompetent. The date on the stamp was from this morning. They had done this before I even arrived at the spa. The trap was not just to hold me, it was to certify me. I flipped the page. Underneath was a contract for a moving company, liquidation of household assets, and under that, a printed email from a real estate agent. Gavin, we have a cash buyer for the house. They can close in 3 days if you can vacate the property. Price is set at $400,000. $400,000. The house was worth $800,000 in this market. He was fire selling it. He was desperate. I heard the front door slam. All right, boys, take a break, Gavin yelled from the living room. I need to make a call. Steps coming toward the kitchen. I had seconds. I grabbed the court order. I grabbed the real estate email. I folded them and shoved them into my pocket. I looked around. I needed a weapon. My eyes landed on the heavy cast iron skillet hanging on the rack. Beatrice's skillet. I grabbed it. The weight was familiar and comforting, but then I stopped. If I hit him, I went to jail. If I hit him, the story he told the police would be true. Violent old man attacks son-in-law. I put the skillet down. I saw Beatrice's red box in my mind, the one I had hidden in the upholstery of her favorite chair in the study. The study was down the hall. Gavin was coming from the living room. I had to cross the hallway before he turned the corner. I moved. I ignored the pain in my leg. I moved with the silence of a man who built the floorboards he was walking on. I slipped into the study just as Gavin walked into the kitchen. "Where is my beer?" I heard him mutter. I closed the study door silently. I locked it. I turned to the chair, the velvet wingback chair where Beatrice used to sit and read her mystery novels. It was still there. They hadn't moved it yet. I fell to my knees in front of it. I felt under the seat cushion. I felt the seam I had sewn back up myself 2 years ago after Beatrice died. I took the letter opener from the desk. I slashed the fabric. I reached inside. My hand closed around cool metal, the box. I pulled it out. It was a red metal cash box, heavy and locked. I heard the handle of the study door rattle. Then a pounding. "Who is in there?" Gavin shouted. I didn't answer. I shoved the box into the waistband of my trousers and covered it with my jacket. "Hey, open this door." He kicked the door. The wood splintered. I looked at the window. It opened onto the side yard right above the trellis with the grapevines. It was a 12-foot drop. With a bad ankle, Gavin kicked the door again. The lock gave way. I threw the window open. The door flew open. Gavin stood there, his face red, his eyes wide with shock. "Lucius," he gasped. How the hell I didn't say a word. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a goodbye. I swung my legs out the window and pushed myself off the sill into the empty air. Gravity took me. I hit the vines. They tore at my clothes and slowed me down, but they didn't stop me. I hit the ground hard. My bad ankle buckled and I rolled, the breath knocked out of me. I scrambled up, running on pure adrenaline. Behind me, Gavin was at the window screaming, "Get him! Stop him! He is crazy! He has a gun!" I didn't have a gun. I had the truth in a red metal box. I ran for the back fence. I vaulted over it into the alleyway. I heard sirens in the distance. Nia must have called the police the moment she realized I wasn't at the spa. I was a fugitive now, a 72-year-old man running from the law, from his family, from the life he had built. But I had the box, and as I disappeared into the shadows of the city, I knew that the war had just begun. The blue and red lights washed over the walls of the study like a fever dream. I stood frozen in the center of the room, the heavy curtains drawn tight, but the strobe of the police cruisers pierced through the fabric. The siren wail died abruptly, replaced by an amplified voice that shook the window panes. "Lucius Coleman, this is the police. We know you are inside. Come out with your hands up." I checked my watch. It had been 7 minutes since I escaped the spa. Nia had been efficient. She had not just reported a missing person. She had escalated it. I moved to the side of the window and peered through the crack in the drapes. There were 3 cruisers on the lawn. 2 officers were crouching behind their doors, guns drawn. They were aiming at my house, my castle. "Drop the weapon, Lucius," the voice boomed again. "We have reports that you are armed and experiencing a mental health crisis. We do not want to hurt you." Armed. That was the magic word. That was the word that gave them permission to shoot a black man in his own home without asking questions. Nia knew that. Gavin knew that. They had weaponized my race and my age against me. They painted a picture of a violent, demented old man so that if they put a bullet in me, it would just be a tragic necessity. I looked at the door. I could hear Gavin downstairs shouting to the officers. "He is upstairs. He is in the study. He has a knife. He tried to attack me." Liar. The man was a professional liar. I didn't have time to be angry. Anger was a luxury for men who weren't about to be breached by a SWAT team. I had minutes, maybe seconds. I turned my back to the window. The room was dark, lit only by the flashing police lights. My eyes landed on the wingback chair in the corner. Beatrice's chair. It was a deep burgundy velvet worn smooth on the arms where her hands had rested for 30 years. I fell to my knees in front of it. I didn't treat it gently. I couldn't afford to. I jammed the letter opener I had taken from the desk into the bottom lining of the chair. The fabric screamed as it tore. I reached up into the hollow space between the springs and the seat cushion. My fingers brushed against dust and loose threads. Panic flared in my chest. Had Gavin found it? Had he sold the chair already? Then cold metal. I pulled it out. The red metal box. It was heavy. It was cold. It felt like salvation. I set it on the floor and popped the latch. It wasn't locked. Beatrice never locked things inside the house. She said locks were for keeping honest people honest, but we were family. Inside, nestled on top of a stack of papers, was a black flip phone, a burner. I stared at it, and for a second the sirens faded and I heard her voice. It was 2 years ago. Beatrice was sitting in this very chair, her face thin from the sickness that would eventually take her. She was watching Gavin through the window as he paced in the backyard talking on his cell phone. "Lucius," she had said, her voice raspy but sharp as a razor. "That boy has a hunger that food cannot fix. He looks at this house like he is measuring it for a coffin." I had told her she was being paranoid. I told her Gavin was just ambitious. She had grabbed my hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were fierce. "Engineers understand concrete and steel, Lucius. You don't understand snakes. If the day comes when I am gone, and you feel the ground shaking under your feet, you look in my chair. I am leaving you a parachute." I picked up the phone. I held the power button. "Please, Beatrice. Please have charged it." The screen lit up. Battery at 80%. She must have charged it right before she went to the hospital for the last time. She knew. She always knew. I shoved the phone into my pocket. I grabbed the papers from the box without looking at them and stuffed them into my jacket. I closed the box and looked around. I couldn't take the metal box. It was too bulky. It would slow me down. The front door downstairs exploded inward with a deafening crash, the sound of a battering ram. Police get on the ground. Heavy boots thundered into the foyer. They were in the house. I scrambled to my feet. My bad ankle buckled, sending a fresh wave of nausea through me. I grabbed the desk to steady myself. Upstairs, go, go, go. They were on the stairs. I could hear the tactical gear rattling, the heavy rhythmic stomping of men trained to clear a room. I looked at the study door. It was flimsy wood. It wouldn't hold them for a second. I turned to the window. It was the only way. I unlatched the window and threw it up. The night air rushed in cold and damp. The officers on the lawn shouted, "He is at the window." Second floor. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. If I hesitated, I would think about my knees. I would think about my age. I would think about the concrete patio below. I climbed onto the sill. I didn't look down at the officers. I looked at the trellis that ran up the side of the house, covered in the thick woody vines of the wisteria Beatrice had planted. I lunged for it. My hands grasped the thick vines. The wood groaned under my weight. The trellis pulled away from the siding with a sickening pop, nails screeching as they were ripped from the wood. I swung wildly, my feet scrabbling for purchase. Freeze, do not move. A flashlight beam hit me in the face, blinding me. I slid down. The vines tore at my clothes, thorns scratching my face and hands. I was falling more than climbing. 10 feet, 8 feet. The trellis snapped completely. I fell backward. I didn't hit the concrete patio. I hit the raised garden bed. Soft earth, but not soft enough. I landed on my side, rolling to absorb the impact, but my left leg, the one I had already twisted, got caught in the wreckage of the trellis. Snap! The sound was louder than the sirens. It was a wet, dry crunch that vibrated all the way up to my hip. I screamed, but the sound died in my throat, choked off by the shock. White light exploded behind my eyes. I curled into a ball, gasping, trying to breathe through the agony. My ankle wasn't just sprained anymore, it was broken. I knew it. I felt the bone grinding. I lay in the dirt, the smell of crushed wisteria and wet soil filling my nose. Movement to my left. The officers from the front lawn were running around the side of the house. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, searching for me. Over there. By the garden. Pain is just data, I told myself. Pain is a structural stress test. You can bear it. You have to bear it. I forced myself up. I couldn't put weight on my left foot. I had to hop. I had to drag it. I scrambled on my hands and knees into the deep shadows of the azalea bushes lining the fence. The thorns bit into my palms, but I crawled. I crawled like an animal. I reached the wooden fence. I knew this fence. I had built it. I knew the loose board behind the compost bin. I shoved the bin aside, my muscles screaming. I pushed the board. It swung open. I squeezed through, dragging my broken leg behind me. I bit my lip until I tasted copper to keep from crying out. I tumbled out onto the neighbor's property, the Johnson's yard. I heard the officers crash into the garden bed on the other side of the fence. He went over the fence. Perimeter set a perimeter. I stood up using the fence for support. My vision was swimming. I needed to get away from the house. I needed to vanish. I limped across the Johnson's yard, staying in the shadows of the oak trees. I made it to the street behind ours. It was quiet here. The siren sounded distant, muffled by the rows of houses. But then I heard a new sound, a sound that made my blood freeze. Barking. Deep, rhythmic, aggressive barking. K-9 unit. They had brought dogs. They were tracking me. I looked down at my leg. I was leaving a trail. Not just a scent trail, but a physical one. I was dragging my foot through the dew-soaked grass. The dogs would find me in minutes. They would smell the fear. They would smell the sweat. I needed to mask the scent. I looked around desperately. I was on a suburban street, manicured lawns, street lights, no place to hide. Then I saw it. At the end of the cul-de-sac where the road dipped low, a storm drain. It was a wide concrete mouth gaping open in the curb, covered by a heavy iron grate. I hobbled toward it. The barking was getting louder. I could hear the handlers shouting commands. I reached the drain. The grate was heavy cast iron. I hooked my fingers through the slots. I pulled. My back screamed. My shoulder, the one with the arthritis, flared with hot pain. But I thought of Gavin's face as he smashed Beatrice's painting. I thought of Nia leaving me in that lobby. I roared silently and pulled. The grate shifted. I dragged it aside just enough to create an opening. I didn't look down. I just slid into the hole. I dropped 4 feet into freezing black water. It came up to my waist. The smell hit me instantly. Rotting leaves, stagnant water, rat droppings, oil. It was vile. It was perfect. I reached up and dragged the grate back into place. It clanged shut, sealing me in. I was in total darkness. The water was icy, numbing the fire in my broken ankle. I waded deeper into the tunnel. The floor was slick with slime. I trailed my hand along the curved concrete wall to guide myself. Above me on the street, I heard paws clicking on the pavement. I heard the panting of the dogs. They stopped right above the grate. The dogs barked a frenzy of noise that echoed in the tunnel like gunshots. He was here. I heard an officer shout, "The scent ends here." I held my breath. I lowered myself into the water until it reached my chin. I became one with the sewage. I became nothing. The dogs whined. They sniffed the grate. But the chemical reek of the storm, run off the oil from the cars, the decay of the city masked me. "Check the next block," the officer yelled. "He probably cut through the yard." The footsteps moved away. The barking faded. I stood alone in the dark, shivering uncontrollably, hip-deep in filth, with a broken leg and a burner phone in my pocket. I was a fugitive. I was hurt. But as I stood there in the belly of the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt dangerous. They thought they had flushed an old man out of his hole. They were wrong. They had just driven the engineer underground, and now I was going to undermine their entire foundation. The sign outside the motel flickered with a dying neon buzz that sounded like a trapped insect. The Starlight Inn. It was the kind of place where people went to hide or to die. I paid for the room with cash, peeling the bills from my shoe, while the clerk behind the bulletproof glass looked at my muddy, torn clothes and asked no questions. He had seen worse. I limped into room 104. The carpet was sticky. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner barely masking the scent of old sweat. I locked the deadbolt and the chain. Then I shoved the dresser in front of the door. I collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was lumpy and stained, but it held me. My left leg was a swollen, throbbing log of agony. I dragged my pant leg up. The ankle was black and blue, twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just broken, it was dislocated. The joint was out of the socket. I am an engineer. I know about structural integrity. I know that if a support beam is misaligned, the whole edifice fails. I couldn't run on this. I couldn't fight on this. I had to fix it. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom. It was thin and rough. I rolled it up and bit down on it. I didn't have whiskey. I didn't have morphine. I had a belt and 72 years of stubbornness. I tied the belt around the foot of the bed frame and looped the other end around my heel. Traction. I needed traction. I gripped the mattress. I looked at the ceiling, counting the water stains. 1, 2, 3. I pulled my body backward with a violent jerk. The sound was a wet pop that reverberated through my skull. The pain was a white-hot explosion, a supernova in my nervous system. I screamed into the towel, a guttural animal noise that tore my throat. I blacked out for a second, gray fog swirling at the edges of my vision. When the world came back into focus, I was panting, sweat pouring down my face. I looked at my leg. It was straight. The joint was back in. It still hurt like hell, but the structural alignment was restored. I lay there for 10 minutes just breathing, letting the adrenaline subside into a dull, throbbing ache. I was alive. I was mobile. I sat up and reached for the red metal box. It was dented from my fall in the sewer, but the lock held. I pried it open with the room key. Inside there was no cash. Beatrice wasn't that simple. There was a thick manila envelope and the burner phone I had found earlier. I opened the envelope. A stack of photos slid out. Grainy, black and white, taken with a telephoto lens. I picked up the first one. It was Gavin. He was younger, maybe 5 years ago. He was shaking hands with a man who looked like a refrigerator in a suit. I flipped the photo over. Beatrice's handwriting neat and cursive. Miami, 2019. The meeting. I pulled out a dossier. It was a background check. A comprehensive deep dive investigation conducted by a private firm in Florida. Subject Gary Stone, alias Gavin Sterling. My breath hitched. He wasn't Gavin. He never was. I read the summary. Gary Stone, convicted of wire fraud and insurance scams in 2015, served 18 months in a minimum security facility, released on parole, vanished. He reinvented himself. He came to my city. He met my daughter. He targeted her. I turned the page. There was a credit report. Not the one he showed us, the one with the perfect score, the real one. Gary Stone owed money, a lot of money, but not to banks. The report listed known associates, the Volkov Syndicate, a Russian organized crime ring operating out of South Florida and expanding up the coast. The debt was listed in a handwritten note in the margin of the report, likely from the investigator Beatrice hired. Owes approx $2.2 million, gambling debts and failed land deals. They have given him a deadline. He is looking for a mark. The date on the note was 3 years ago, right before he married Nia. I felt sick. Beatrice knew. She knew he was a shark before he even walked down the aisle. Why didn't she tell me I found a letter at the bottom of the stack? My dearest Lucius, if you are reading this, I am gone and my fears were justified. I didn't tell you because I knew you. You are a man of action. You would have confronted him. You would have tried to protect Nia by force, and he would have hurt you, or Nia would have hated you for destroying her happiness. I needed proof. I needed to let the trap snap shut on him, not us. I tried to pay him off once to make him leave, but he stayed. He wants the land, Lucius. He wants the Southside lot. He thinks it is just dirt, but he knows about the rezoning before we did. He needs to sell it to pay his debts. If he doesn't pay by this Friday, they will kill him, and he will burn our house down to save himself. Friday. Today was Wednesday. He had 48 hours. That was why the rush. That was why the spa. That was why the fire sale of my house. He wasn't just greedy. He was a dead man walking, and he was trying to use my life as a shield. I put the papers down. My hands were trembling not from pain but from rage. He had married my daughter to harvest her inheritance. He had looked me in the eye at Sunday dinners for years, knowing he was going to gut me like a fish the moment I became useful. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old smartphone. The screen was cracked from the fall, but it still powered on. I had destroyed the SIM card to stop them from tracking me, but the Wi-Fi radio still worked. I connected to the motel's open network. The phone vibrated instantly. A flood of notifications cascaded down the screen. Ping, ping, ping. Bank of America. Alert unusual activity. Wire transfer of $50,000 initiated. Ping, Bank of America. Alert wire transfer of $75,000 initiated. Ping, Bank of America. Alert account overdraft. Insufficient funds. They were draining me. They were stripping the carcass before the body was even cold. They must have found my checkbook or forged my digital signature. Then a string of messages from Nia. Daddy, please come home. Daddy, the police are looking for you. They say you are dangerous. Daddy, Gavin is so worried. He says if you don't come back tonight, the officers will have to treat you as a hostile threat. They have shooters, Daddy. Please, just tell us where you are. She wasn't pleading for my life. She was pleading for her husband's payday. She knew. She had to know. You don't live with a man like Gary Stone for 3 years and not see the shark under the skin. She was complicit. Or she was so desperate to maintain the illusion of her high society life that she was willing to sacrifice her own father to keep the lights on. I typed a reply. My thumb hovered over the send button. I know who Gary Stone is, no. That would tip my hand. If they knew I had the file, they wouldn't just send police, they would send the Russians. Or Gavin would come himself with a gun. I deleted the text. I turned off the Wi-Fi. I went dark again. I picked up the burner phone Beatrice had left. It was an old flip phone, rugged and simple. I powered it up. It had a full signal. I dialed the one number I knew by heart, the one man Beatrice trusted as much as I did. Elias Strickland, my lawyer, my friend since Vietnam. It rang once, twice. Strickland Law, a gruff voice answered. Elias, it is Lucius, I said. Silence, heavy and thick. Who is this? Elias asked, his voice low and dangerous. It is Lucius Elias. I am not dead. I am in a motel on the south side. They tried to commit me. Lucius Elias said slowly, carefully. I am looking at a document on my desk right now. It was faxed to the court clerk an hour ago. It is a certificate of incapacitation. And attached to it is a medical report from Serenity Wellness. I know I said. They forged it. No, Lucius, you don't understand. It is not just an incapacitation order. There is a clinical update attached. It says Lucius Coleman suffered a massive stroke at 4:00 p.m. today while undergoing hydrotherapy. It says the patient is currently in a vegetative coma with no brain activity. I felt the blood drain from my face. 4:00 p.m. That was 20 minutes after I escaped. They didn't just say I was crazy, they killed me. Legally, I was a vegetable. If you are, Lucius Elias said, his voice trembling slightly. Then who is the man in the bed at Serenity Wellness? Because according to this paperwork, you are hooked up to a ventilator, and your daughter has just signed a do not resuscitate order. They had a body. They had a double. Or they had simply lied so effectively that the system swallowed it whole. Elias, I said, gripping the phone tight. I am breathing. I am walking. And I have proof that Gavin is a con man named Gary Stone. You need to stay hidden, Elias hissed. If you are legally in a coma and Nia has power of attorney, she can liquidate everything. Tonight, she can sign the deed to the house. She can empty the trusts. You are a ghost, Lucius. If you walk into a bank, they will call the police because a dead man is trying to withdraw money. I am not a ghost, I growled. I am a man with a hammer. Do not do anything stupid, Lucius. Where are you? I am not telling you. I said. Not yet. If they trace this, you are liable. Just tell me one thing. The south lot. Can she sell it? Technically, yes. If she has the guardianship papers and the medical certificate, she acts as you. Can I stop it? Only if you prove you are alive, sound of mind, and that they committed fraud. But that takes time. Courts are closed. I don't have time, I said. He owes the Russians by Friday. Then you have to stop the money, Elias said. You have to make the asset toxic. I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed. My ankle throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I was dead on paper. My accounts were being drained. My house was being sold. And my daughter had just signed an order to let a stranger die in my place. I looked at the red box. I looked at the file on Gary Stone. He needed the south lot. That was the key. He needed to sell that land to pay the Russians. If I couldn't stop the sale legally, I had to stop it physically. I had to make sure that land was worthless, or I had to make sure the buyer knew exactly what they were purchasing. I stood up. The pain was sharp but manageable now. I was no longer a confused old man. I was a soldier who had just found his enemy's supply line. I grabbed my jacket. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to go to war. And the first battle was going to be in the streets where nobody looked for a dead man. The morning sun hit the motel window like a spotlight on a crime scene. I woke up stiff. My joints locked like rusted hinges. My left ankle was a swollen mass of purple and black, throbbing with a dull, rhythmic cadence that matched my heartbeat. I was hungry. Not the polite appetite of a man waiting for Sunday brunch, but a gnawing animal emptiness that clawed at my stomach. I checked my pockets. I had the cash from the bank, I had the burner phone, I had the documents, but I couldn't walk into a diner. I couldn't go to a grocery store. My face was likely on every patrol car dashboard in the city. To the world, I was a confused, dangerous old man who had escaped medical custody. If I used a credit card, the digital alarm would sound before the receipt even printed. If I showed my face, a good Samaritan would call 911 thinking they were saving me. I had to become invisible. I went to the bathroom mirror. The man staring back was unrecognizable. My eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. My gray stubble was thick and unkempt. I looked wild. I looked desperate. Good. I took the dirt from the flower pot outside the door and rubbed it into my jacket. I tore the hem of my shirt. I stopped trying to hide my limp. I exaggerated it. I hunched my shoulders, curving my spine into the shape of defeat. I left the motel not as Lucius Coleman, the respected engineer, but as just another piece of urban debris, another old black man that society had decided to look through rather than look at. I walked to a gas station 3 blocks away. I kept my head down, muttering to myself, acting the part of the invisible derelict. I bought a stale sandwich and a bottle of water with crumpled bills, counting out the change slowly with shaking hands. The clerk didn't even make eye contact. He just wanted me out of his store. I ate in an alley sitting on a milk crate. The food tasted like cardboard, but it fueled the engine. I watched the city move around me. Police cars cruised by, their radios crackling. They were looking for a silver sedan, maybe, or a man in a suit. They weren't looking for the heap of rags eating a turkey sandwich in the shadow of a dumpster. I was a ghost now. I had no name. I had no history. I only had a mission. And ghosts have one advantage over the living. We can go places where the living are afraid to tread. I needed a vehicle. My legs wouldn't carry me far enough, and I couldn't take public transit. I needed something that wouldn't trigger a license plate reader. I needed Big Mike. Mike ran a garage in the industrial district, a place locally known as the Yard. It wasn't the kind of place that offered coffee while you waited for an oil change. It was a chop shop that did legitimate repairs on the side to keep the IRS away. Mike and I went back 40 years. I had helped him with a zoning issue when the city tried to condemn his property in the 90s. He owed me. I walked for 2 hours. The pain in my ankle became a white noise, a constant frequency that sharpened my focus. When I reached the Yard, the sun was high and hot. The air smelled of gasoline burning rubber and ozone. I slipped through a hole in the chain-link fence. The garage bay was open, dark, and cavernous. I could hear the high-pitched whine of an angle grinder. I stepped into the shadows. A man was under a lifted Chevelle welding a new exhaust. He was huge, his arms as thick as my thighs covered in grease and tattoos. "Big Mike," I said. My voice was raspy. The grinding stopped. The man slid out from under the car on a creeper. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. He squinted at me. He didn't smile. He reached for a 2-foot breaker bar resting on the workbench. "We are closed, old man," Mike growled. "Get lost before I call the dogs." He didn't recognize me. The disguise was working too well. "It is Lucius, Mike. Put the iron down." He froze. He stepped closer, peering into the gloom. His eyes widened. "Lucius, you look like you got chewed up by a thresher and spit out the back. I heard you were dead, or crazy, or both. The word travels fast in the underground." "Not dead yet," I said, limping forward, "just underground." Mike lowered the bar. He looked at my leg. He looked at the dirt on my face. "The cops were here yesterday." Mike said, his voice low, "asking about a silver sedan, asking if I had seen you. They said you have dementia, said you might be violent." "Do I look violent to you, Mike?" "You look like hell, Lucius. But you don't look crazy. You look like a man who is cornered. I am cornered. My son-in-law is trying to sell my house. My daughter is helping him. They tried to lock me away. I need wheels, Mike, and I need protection." Mike chewed on his lip. He looked at the street, checking for surveillance. "Helping you is a felony, Lucius. Kidnapping a ward of the state. Harboring a fugitive." I pulled the roll of cash from my sock. It was $3,000. "I am buying, not borrowing, and I need something that won't be missed." Mike looked at the money. He looked at me. He spat on the concrete. "Keep your money. You saved this shop when the city council wanted to turn it into a parking lot. My daddy taught me to pay my debts." He walked to the back of the shop. He pulled a tarp off a vehicle in the corner. It was a 1995 Ford F-150, faded red paint, rusted wheel wells, a dent in the bumper that looked like a permanent scowl. "She is ugly," Mike said, patting the hood. "But the engine is solid. No GPS, no OnStar. The plates are from a scrapper that was crushed last week. She is a ghost just like you." He tossed me the keys. Then he reached into a drawer in his toolbox. He pulled out a heavy object wrapped in an oily rag. He handed it to me. I unwrapped it. It was a snub-nosed .38 revolver. The metal was cold and pitted, but the cylinder spun freely. "It is not registered," Mike said. "Mike." "It works. Do not make me regret this, Lucius." I tucked the gun into my belt. It was heavy. It was a weight I hadn't carried since Vietnam. "Thank you, Mike. Get out of here. If they ask, I haven't seen you since Christmas." I climbed into the truck. The cab smelled of stale tobacco and old vinyl. It smelled like freedom. I turned the key. The engine roared to life with a cough and a rumble. I backed out of the bay. As I was about to drive away, Mike waved at me. He pointed to the small television sitting on a shelf covered in dust. "You might want to see this," he shouted over the engine noise. I looked at the screen. It was the local news. Breaking news banner. There was Nia. She was standing on my front porch. She was wearing black, looking small and fragile. A microphone was thrust in her face. "Please, if anyone sees him, call the police immediately." Nia sobbed, tears streaming down her face. She looked directly into the camera. Her acting was flawless. "My father is not himself. He has been battling aggressive dementia for months. He can be very convincing, but he is confused and paranoid. He thinks people are trying to hurt him." The camera panned to Gavin. He was standing beside her, his arm around her shoulders, looking stoic and devastated. He wiped a tear from his eye. "We just want him home safe," Gavin said, his voice cracking perfectly. "He needs his medication. Without it, he could be a danger to himself or others. Please, bring our dad home." I sat in the truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They weren't just looking for me. They were assassinating my character. They were painting a target on my back. Aggressive dementia, danger to others. They were giving the police permission to use lethal force. If I reached for my wallet, they would say I was reaching for a weapon. If I tried to explain, they would say I was ranting. I watched Nia cry. I watched the daughter I had raised, the woman I had protected, use my love as a weapon to bury me. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't being manipulated. She was the architect. She was standing on the porch of the house I built, selling my life to the highest bidder and crying crocodile tears for the cameras. I felt the last thread of attachment snap. The father in me died in that garage watching that grainy television screen. What was left was the engineer. And I had a demolition to schedule. I turned off the truck. I sat there for a moment in the silence. I couldn't go after Gavin yet. He was surrounded by police and press. He was in the light. I had to stay in the dark. I needed to start at the foundation. I needed to find the cracks in their story. I thought about the spa. I thought about the fear in the receptionist's eyes. Keisha. She was the one who warned me. She was the one who told me to run. She knew. She knew about the other old man. She knew about the deaths. She was the loose end. She was the witness. Gavin would know that too. If he was cleaning house, if he was tying up loose ends, Keisha was a liability. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't running anymore. I was hunting. I needed to find Keisha before Gavin did. I needed to make her talk. And if anyone got in my way, I had a 2-ton truck and a .38 special, and I was already dead on paper. I parked the rusted Ford F-150 across the street from the Serenity Wellness Center entrance. It was 7 in the evening. The golden hour had passed, leaving the street bathed in the flat gray light of dusk. The air in the cab was thick with heat, and the metallic tang of Mike's unwashed work clothes. Big Mike sat in the passenger seat, filling the space like a boulder. He was cleaning his fingernails with a hunting knife, his eyes scanning the street with the boredom of a man who had spent half his life watching things he wasn't supposed to see. We had been waiting for 2 hours. My ankle was throbbing a steady, dull baseline against the dashboard, but I ignored it. I was watching the automatic doors. "There she is," I said, my voice low. Keisha stepped out of the glass doors. She wasn't wearing her uniform anymore. She was in jeans and a hoodie, her bag clutched tight to her chest. She didn't look like a woman going home after a long shift. She looked like a woman escaping a crime scene. She kept her head down, walking fast, checking over her shoulder every few steps. She turned left, heading toward the bus stop at the corner. "Start the engine," Mike grunted, putting the knife away. I turned the key. The truck rumbled to life. I didn't turn on the headlights. Keisha made it halfway down the block when a black sedan peeled away from the curb 2 cars ahead of her. It didn't have plates. It cut across the lane and slammed onto the sidewalk, blocking her path. 2 men got out. They were big. They wore cheap suits that didn't fit right across the shoulders. They weren't police. They weren't spa security. They moved with the heavy, aggressive confidence of hired muscle. Keisha froze. She tried to back up, but the passenger door of the sedan opened and one of the men lunged. He grabbed her arm. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the city noise. He yanked her toward the car. She dropped her bag. She was fighting, kicking at his shins, but he was twice her size. "They are taking her," Mike said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. They were scrubbing the witness. Gavin wasn't taking chances. I didn't think. I didn't calculate the stopping distance or the structural integrity of the sedan. I just reacted. I slammed the truck into gear and floored the accelerator. The tires squealed on the asphalt. The old V8 engine roared a beast, waking up angry. I aimed for the gap between the sedan and the building. The man holding Keisha looked up. His eyes went wide. He tried to let go, but he was too slow. I hit the sedan's open door. The sound was a deafening crunch of metal on metal. The door was torn off its hinges, flying, spinning down the sidewalk. The impact threw the sedan sideways, pinning the driver inside. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt, smoking and hissing. "Get her," I shouted. Big Mike didn't need instructions. He kicked his door open and bailed out before the truck had even fully stopped settling. He had a 2-foot tire iron in his hand. The second goon, the one who hadn't been holding Keisha, reached into his jacket. He was going for a gun. Mike didn't hesitate. He swung the tire iron. He didn't aim for the man. He aimed for the windshield of the sedan. Smash! The glass exploded inward, showering the driver in safety crystals. The driver screamed, covering his face. The man reaching for the gun hesitated, distracted by the violence. That split second was all Mike needed. He stepped in swift for a man of his size and drove the end of the iron into the man's solar plexus. The goon folded like a lawn chair, gasping for air, the gun forgotten. Keisha was on the ground, scrambling backward, terrified. She looked at Mike, then at the truck. She didn't recognize the vehicle. She didn't see a savior. She saw a war zone. "Keisha, get in." I yelled, leaning across the seat to throw the passenger door open. "It is Lucius, the old man. Get in." She looked at me. Recognition flickered in her eyes. The fear didn't leave, but desperation took over. She grabbed her bag from the pavement and ran. She dove into the cab, scrambling over the center console to make room for Mike. "Mike, let us go," I shouted. Mike took one last look at the groaning men. He spat on the ground near them, then turned and jumped into the truck. I threw it in reverse. The tires smoked as I backed away from the wreckage. The driver of the sedan was trying to crawl out the window, shouting into a radio. They would have backup. They always had backup. I spun the truck around, jumping the curb, the suspension groaning under the abuse. I hit the street and gunned it. "We need to disappear," Mike said, watching the mirrors. "Head for the industrial district. Too many alleys." I drove like a man possessed. I ran 2 red lights. I cut through a gas station parking lot to lose a tail that might not even be there. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't an engineer anymore. I was a getaway driver. Keisha was hyperventilating in the middle seat. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "You are dead," she stammered, staring at me with wide, white eyes. "You are dead." Dr. Aris signed the paper. "You died at 4 o'clock. "I am not dead, Keisha," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "I am very much alive, and I am sorry about your arm." She looked down at her arm where the goon had grabbed her. Then she looked at me. She started to laugh, a high, hysterical sound that bordered on sobbing. "I stole it," she gasped. "I stole the paper." "What paper?" I asked. I turned down a narrow side street, slowing down to blend in with traffic now that we were clear of the immediate danger. She fumbled with her bag. Her hands were shaking so bad she dropped it twice. She ripped the zipper open and pulled out a crumpled, water-stained sheet of paper. "This one," she said, thrusting it at me. "The one you almost signed. The one Dr. Aris tried to hide after you ran." I glanced at it. It was the liability waiver, but now I could see the back page. The page Dr. Aris had tried to breeze past. It was a pre-signed death certificate. "Wait," I said, pulling over to the curb under a broken streetlight. "Let me see that." I took the paper. It was a standard state death certificate. The patient name was blank. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest due to natural causes. But the signature at the bottom stopped my heart. "Attending physician Dr. Marcus Akeem." "Who is Dr. Akeem?" Mike asked, leaning over to look. "He was the medical director," Keisha whispered. "He was a good man. He tried to stop Aris from over-medicating the patients." "Tried?" I asked. Keisha looked out the window, tears streaming down her face. "Dr. Akeem died 3 months ago," she said. "Car accident. Or that is what they said. But Aris kept his stamp. He kept his login. He has been signing death certificates with a dead man's hand." I stared at the paper. This was the smoking gun. This wasn't just malpractice. This was systemic fraud. They were using a dead doctor to certify dead patients so no living doctor would lose their license if an autopsy was ordered. "This proves everything I said. This proves they are running a kill house." Keisha shook her head violently. "It proves more than that, Mr. Coleman. You don't understand. It is not just about killing old people. It is about the payout." "What payout?" I asked. She reached into her bag again. She pulled out a second piece of paper. It was a photocopy of an email she had printed out. "I found this on Aris's desk when he ran after you," she said. "It is from an insurance broker." I took the email. It was addressed to Gavin Sterling. Subject: policy activation. Lucius Coleman. The text was brief. "Policy number 884920 is active as of this morning. Premium paid in full. Beneficiary confirmed as Gavin Sterling. In the event of accidental death or sudden medical failure during treatment, payout is expedited within 48 hours. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. The coverage amount, $5 million. The air left the cab. I sat there staring at the number. $5 million. He didn't just want the land. The land was just to pay the Russians quickly. The insurance was the retirement plan. The insurance was the fortune. "He bought a policy on my life a month ago," Keisha said, her voice trembling. "He forged your signature on the application. Aris did the medical exam on paper without ever seeing you. They bet $5 million that you wouldn't survive the spa." I felt a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the night air. My life, my 40 years of work, my love for my daughter. It was all just a line item on a ledger to him. He had quantified my existence, insured it, and then tried to liquidate it. Nia knew, I whispered. She had to know. You cannot buy a $5 million policy without the family knowing. Keisha nodded slowly. She knew Mr. Coleman. I heard them talking in the lobby before you came in. She asked Gavin if it would hurt. And what did he say? He said you wouldn't feel a thing. He said it was a mercy. A mercy. He called murdering me for $5 million a mercy. I handed the papers back to Keisha. My hand was steady now. The shaking was gone. The fear was gone. Mike, I said, we need to go to the party. What party? Mike asked. The charity gala Gavin is hosting tonight, I said. The one where he is supposed to be the grieving son-in-law raising money for dementia research in honor of his sick father-in-law. I put the truck in gear. He wants a show, I said, looking at the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I am going to give him a show. I am going to walk into that ballroom and I am going to introduce him to the dead man. I sat in the cab of the rusted truck with the engine idling and the vibration traveling up my spine. Big Mike was checking the load in the revolver and Keisha was staring out the window at the passing streetlights, clutching the evidence to her chest. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over the contact list. I knew what I had to do, but my heart was acting like a traitor, pounding against my ribs with a rhythm that screamed, stop. This was my daughter. This was the little girl I had carried on my shoulders at the zoo. This was the teenager I had taught to drive in a parking lot just 3 miles from here. But that girl was gone. I had to accept that the woman who had left me in that spa was someone else entirely. I needed to look her in the eye one last time. I needed to give her one final chance to be Nia Coleman before I treated her like Mrs. Gavin Sterling. I pressed the video call button. The screen blurred and shifted pixels dancing as it connected. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. I thought she would see an unknown number and ignore it like she ignored her conscience. But then the connection clicked and her face filled the small screen. She was in a dressing room. I could see the lights of a vanity mirror behind her reflecting off her diamond earrings. She was applying lipstick a deep blood red. She looked perfect. She looked polished. She looked like she didn't have a care in the world. She saw me and she didn't gasp. She didn't cry out in relief. Her eyes narrowed into slits of annoyance. "Daddy," she said, her voice sharp and impatient. "Why are you calling me from a strange number? The police are looking everywhere for you. You need to come back to the facility. You are sick." I looked at her. I looked for a trace of fear or guilt, but I found only irritation. "I am not sick, Nia," I said, my voice low and steady. "I know about the insurance. I know about the $5 million. I know about the dead doctor signing my death certificate." She froze. The lipstick hovered an inch from her mouth. For a second I saw a flicker of panic, but then she did something that broke my heart more than the betrayal itself. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop it, Daddy," she snapped, putting the lipstick down with a clatter. "You and your conspiracies. You always think everyone is out to get you. This is exactly why you need help. You are paranoid." "I am not paranoid, Nia," I said. "I am awake. Why are you doing this? I gave you everything. I paid for your college. I bought your first car. I welcomed Gavin into our home. Why do you want me dead?" She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, bitter sound that scraped against my soul. "Nobody wants you dead, Daddy," she said, leaning into the camera, her face distorting with anger. "We just want you out of the way. You are so selfish. You have always been selfish. You sit in that big house with all that equity and those land deeds rotting in a box while Gavin and I are drowning." "Drowning?" I asked. "You drive a Mercedes, you wear designer clothes, you live in a penthouse. It is all leverage, Daddy," she screamed, her composure cracking. "It is all credit. It is all a game, and you have the chips to help us win, but you won't play. You hoard it. You sit on millions of dollars of assets like a dragon while Gavin is trying to build an empire. He is a genius, Daddy. He is a visionary. He just needs capital. He just needs a bridge loan, and you are the bridge." I stared at her. This wasn't desperation, this was entitlement. She truly believed that my life's work, my blood and sweat existed solely to fuel her husband's delusions of grandeur. "He is not a genius, Nia," I said. "He is a con man. He owes money to the mob. He is using you." "He is not using me," she spat back. We are partners. We are going to change this city. But you are stuck in the past. You and Mom were always so small, so afraid, saving pennies, clipping coupons, living like poor people when you didn't have to. I hated it. I hated growing up like that. I hated watching you come home with dirt under your fingernails. The words hit me like physical blows. She didn't just want the money. She despised where it came from. She despised the labor. She despised the black dirt and the concrete dust that had paid for her private school. I looked at her and I realized she had been brainwashed not by Gavin, but by the promise of a life she hadn't earned. She wanted to be like him. She wanted the easy confidence of the white upper class, the feeling that the world owed her a living. She looked at me and she didn't see a father. She saw a reminder of a struggle she wanted to erase. She wanted to scrub the history off her skin and replace it with gold leaf. "You are ashamed of us," I whispered. "You are ashamed of who you are. I am ashamed that you are too stupid to see opportunity when it stares you in the face," she hissed. "Gavin offered to manage your assets years ago. He offered to double your net worth. But you said no. You said you wanted to keep it safe. Safe is for cowards, Daddy. Gavin takes risks. Gavin is a king, and I am going to be a queen. And if you have to go into a home or into the ground for that to happen, then that is the price of progress." I felt a coldness spread through my chest, turning my blood to slush. There was no reaching her. The infection was too deep. She had sold her soul for a seat at a table where she would never truly be welcome. She thought she was a partner, but she was just another asset to Gavin, just like the South lot. Just like my life insurance policy. She was so blinded by the glare of the fool's gold that she couldn't see the knife in her husband's hand. Suddenly, the phone in her hand jerked. The camera angle shifted violently, spinning around the room before settling on a face I knew too well. Gavin. He was wearing a tuxedo. He looked handsome and charming and utterly demonic. He was smiling, but his eyes were flat and dead. "Hello, Lucius," he said, his voice smooth like oil on water. "Nia tells me you are being difficult." I looked at the man who had ordered my murder. "The game is over, Gavin," I said. "I have the files. I know who you are, Gary Stone." He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He just laughed, a soft chuckle that sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Gary Stone is a ghost, Lucius," he said. "Nobody cares about Gary Stone, and nobody cares about you. You are a dead man walking. You are a fugitive with dementia. Who is going to believe you? The police are already looking for a body." "I am coming for you, Gavin," I said. "Come then," he taunted. "Come to the gala. I will have security waiting. But you are too late, old man. I already won." "What do you mean?" I asked, my grip on the phone tightening. "The South lot," he said, his grin widening to reveal his teeth. "The land you love so much, the land you were saving for your grandchildren. I sold it." "You can't sell it," I said. "It is in my name." "Not anymore," he said. "I have a power of attorney signed by 2 witnesses and a notary. I have a medical certificate of your incapacitation. I signed the deed an hour ago. The buyers wired the funds. The money is in my offshore account. It is done. I am solvent, Lucius. I paid my debts, and tomorrow I am going to put you in the ground for real." He leaned closer to the camera, his face filling the screen. "You are nothing, Lucius. You are a useless old man who stood in the way of greatness. You should have just died at the spa. It would have been painless. Now it is going to be messy." He didn't wait for a response. He ended the call. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. I sat there in the silence of the truck cab. The connection was broken. The link to my past was severed. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't grief. It was the feeling of a heavy burden being lifted. For 35 years I had carried Nia. I had carried her expectations, her demands, her disappointments. I had carried the weight of trying to give her a better life than I had. I had protected her from the harshness of the world. I had shielded her from the truth of what it takes to build something from nothing. And in doing so, I had created a monster. I had raised a daughter who despised the very hands that fed her. I looked at the black screen of the phone. Nia Coleman was dead. The girl I loved died the moment she looked into that camera and told me I was a coward for working hard. The woman who existed now was a stranger. She was an enemy combatant. She was the pilot fish swimming next to the shark, hoping to eat the scraps of his kills. I put the phone down on the dashboard. My hand was steady. My heart was cold. I turned to Big Mike. "She is gone." "Mike," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and metallic. Mike looked at me. He saw the change in my eyes. He saw the father die and the engineer take over. "What did they say?" Lucius Mike asked quietly. "They said they sold the land," I said. "They said they won." I looked out the windshield at the city skyline glowing in the distance. Somewhere in those lights, Gavin and Nia were clinking champagne glasses celebrating their victory. They thought they had outsmarted the old man. They thought they had stripped the foundation and left the building standing on air. But they forgot one thing. I knew the blueprints. I knew where the load-bearing walls were, and I knew exactly which pillar to pull to bring the whole house down on top of them. "Start the truck, Mike," I said. Mike turned the key. The engine roared a sound of pure aggression. "We are going to the party," I said, "and we are going to show them what happens when you try to bury a man who is still holding the detonator." I checked the revolver in my belt. I checked the papers in my jacket. I had the truth about the land. I had the truth about the trust. Gavin thought he had sold the south lot. He thought he had the money. He was about to find out that he had sold a phantom asset to a very dangerous buyer, and when that buyer realized the deed was worthless, Gavin wasn't going to have to worry about me. He was going to have to worry about people who didn't use lawyers. I was done being a father. Tonight I was just the executioner. The south lot was 3 acres of prime commercial real estate sitting on the edge of the expanding downtown district. It was the crown jewel of the portfolio Beatrice and I had built over 40 years. Gavin said he sold it. He said the money was already in his offshore account. I sat in the dark cab of the truck next to Big Mike and tried to process the mechanics of that transaction. In the real world, legal property sales take time. There are title searches and environmental inspections and escrow periods. Even a cash deal takes days to clear the county clerk's office. But Gavin claimed it was done in an hour. That told me everything I needed to know about the buyer. No legitimate developer moves that fast. No bank wires millions of dollars at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night based on a deed signed by a man with a fresh power of attorney. He hadn't sold it to a company. He had sold it to the streets. He had sold it to the people he owed money to, probably for pennies on the dollar, just to clear his debt and buy his life back. He had handed them a piece of paper that he thought was a valid deed, and they had handed him a suitcase of cash or a wire transfer from a shell company in the Caymans. But Gavin was an amateur playing a professional game. He assumed that because he had forged my signature and obtained a fraudulent medical certificate, he had the keys to the castle. He assumed that the deed to the south lot was a simple piece of paper that could be transferred by a guardian. He was wrong. He didn't know Beatrice. My wife was a woman who didn't trust easily. When she got sick, she didn't just hide a box in a chair. She fortified our assets. She restructured the ownership of our most valuable properties. I needed to see the file, not the digital copy that Gavin would have hacked or altered. I needed the physical original file sitting in the basement of the county recorder's office. I looked at the burner phone. I dialed Elias Strickland again. "Elias, meet me at the Hall of Records," I said. "The service entrance on 5th? "Lucius, are you crazy?" Elias hissed. "It is 10 at night. The building is locked. There are guards. You were the deputy registrar for 10 years before you went private, Elias," I said. "You still have the master key, don't you?" Silence. Then a heavy sigh. "If we get caught, I lose my license. You go to jail." "If we don't go, Gavin wins," I said, "and he kills me." "Be there in 20 minutes, Elias said. We parked the truck 2 blocks away in the shadow of a parking structure. Mike stayed behind the wheel, keeping the engine running. Keisha stayed with him, clutching her bag like a lifeline. I limped toward the massive stone building that housed the history of every square inch of land in the county. Elias was waiting by the steel door in the alley. He looked pale. He was wearing a trench coat over his pajamas, looking like a man who expected to be arrested at any moment. "You look terrible, Lucius," he whispered, unlocking the door with a shaking hand. "I feel terrible," I said, pushing past him into the cool, stale air of the building. We moved quickly. The hallways were dim lit only by the emergency exit signs casting a sickly green glow on the polished terrazzo floors. My footsteps echoed too loudly. I tried to cushion them, but my broken ankle made me clumsy. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. We took the stairs down to the archives. The air got heavier, smelling of dust and decaying paper. This was where the truth lived, not on screens, but on paper. "Row 42, Elias whispered, pointing his flashlight beam down a long aisle of metal shelving units. "The Coleman Trust." We walked down the row. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt exposed. I felt the weight of the $5 million life insurance policy hanging over my head. If a guard walked in now, if a camera saw us, it was over. Elias stopped. He pulled a thick accordion file from the shelf. "Here it is," he said. He opened it on a small metal table. He shined the light on the documents. There were the original deeds, the surveys I had done myself in 1985, and on top the trust agreement Beatrice had filed 3 years ago. I flipped through the pages. My hands left smudges of dirt on the pristine paper. I found it. Section 14, Clause C. I read it out loud, my voice a rasp in the silence. The irrevocable trust. Gavin thought the land was in my name. He thought a power of attorney over Lucius Coleman gave him control over the land. But the land wasn't mine, not anymore. Beatrice had moved the title into the Coleman family irrevocable trust. And she had installed a safety mechanism, a poison pill designed specifically for a situation like this. "Look at this, Elias," I said, pointing to the paragraph at the bottom of page 12. Elias leaned in, adjusting his glasses. He read it, and then he looked at me, his eyes wide. "Restriction on alienation," he read. "To prevent elder abuse, coercion, or fraud, any transfer, sale, or encumbrance of assets within this trust requires the physical presence of the grantor at the offices of the trustee. Furthermore, identity verification must be established via live biometric fingerprint scan matched against the sample on file. Power of attorney is explicitly excluded from authorizing transfers of trust assets." I leaned back against the shelves, a dark smile spreading across my face. She knew I whispered. She knew he would try to use a piece of paper to steal it, so she made the paper worthless without the body. Gavin had a power of attorney. He had a medical certificate saying I was a vegetable. He had forged my signature on a deed transfer, but he didn't have my thumb. And without my living thumb pressing down on the scanner at the law firm that managed the trust, that transfer was void. It was impossible. The title company would flag it instantly. The county clerk would reject it. But Gavin said he had already sold it. He said he had the money. That meant he hadn't gone through a title company. He had done a handshake deal with criminals. He had handed them a forged deed, and they had handed him cash, assuming the paperwork would clear later. Or he had lied to them, telling them the trust was dissolved. He had sold them a phantom. He had sold them the Brooklyn Bridge. He took $2 million from the Russian mob for a piece of land he could not legally deliver. He didn't just steal from me. He stole from them. Elias looked at me, and he saw the realization dawn on my face. Lucius. Elias said, his voice terrified. If he took their money and the deed bounces, they will kill him, I finished. They won't sue him, they won't send him a demand letter, they will skin him alive. I closed the file. I didn't need to take it. The truth was right here, safe in the basement. Gavin thinks he bought his freedom, I said. He thinks he paid his debt. But all he did was dig his grave a little deeper. I looked at the time. It was 11 o'clock. The gala was in full swing. Gavin was probably making a toast right now, celebrating his genius. He was probably shaking hands with the men he had just swindled. We need to make a copy of this page, I said. We found a copier in the clerk's office. The light of the scanner flashed in the dark room like lightning. I made 5 copies of the trust restriction. We left the building the way we came, slipping out into the night like shadows. The city was quiet around us, but inside my head the drums of war were beating louder than ever. I climbed back into the truck. Mike looked at me. "Did you find it?" he asked. "I found the detonator," I said. I looked at the copies in my hand. This was the weapon. I didn't need a gun. I didn't need the police. I just needed to get this piece of paper into the hands of the men Gavin owed money to. Gavin was hosting a party. He was surrounded by the elite of the city, and lurking in the corners the representatives of the shadow world he served. "Drive, Mike," I said. "Take us to the gala." "I am going to deliver a message," I said, staring at the paper. Gavin sold them a lie. I am going to give them the receipt. And when they realize what he did, they are going to do my work for me. I wasn't going to save my property. I was going to use my property to crush him. The South Lot was no longer an asset. It was the bait in a trap that had just snapped shut on the neck of a wolf, and I was about to go pull the chain. I held the manila envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of the paper inside. It was a single sheet, a photocopy of the irrevocable trust clause that Beatrice had hidden in the county archives. To anyone else it was just legalese, but to the men Gavin Sterling owed money to, it was a declaration of war. It was proof that Gavin had sold them air. It was proof that the $2 million they had fronted him was unsecured and gone. Big Mike drove the truck into the industrial park on the east side of the city. We were far from the manicured lawns of my neighborhood. This was a place of corrugated steel warehouses and barbed wire fences. We parked down the street from a building marked Vostok Logistics. The sign was faded, but the security cameras on the corners were brand new and state-of-the-art. This was the front for the Volkov Syndicate, the people who held Gavin's leash. I did not deliver the package myself. I was a ghost, and ghosts do not walk into Russian mob fronts. We had paid a bicycle courier $50 to drop it at the front desk. I watched through the cracked windshield as the kid in the neon vest rode up to the security gate, passed the envelope to the guard, and rode away. The guard looked at the envelope. It was marked urgent, transaction reference South Lot. He opened it. I saw him pull out the paper. He read it. He stiffened. He immediately picked up his radio and spoke rapidly. A moment later, a heavy steel door opened and a man in a sharp suit walked out. He took the paper, read it once, and his face turned a shade of red that I could see from 50 yards away. He took out his phone and made a call. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who had just realized his pocket had been picked. "Drive Mike," I said. "We need to get to Gavin's office before they do." Mike pulled the truck out and we headed downtown. Gavin leased a glass-walled office on the 10th floor of a building that cost more per square foot than my first house. It was all part of the illusion, the success, the image. We parked on the top level of the parking garage across the street. It gave us a direct line of sight into Gavin's corner office. I raised the binoculars Mike kept in his glove box. There he was. Gavin was sitting behind his massive desk, feet up, laughing into his phone. He was probably talking to a contractor or a car dealer spending the money he thought he had secured. He looked relaxed. He looked victorious. He had no idea that the structural integrity of his world had just been compromised. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of Gavin's building. 3 men got out. I recognized the man in the suit from the warehouse. He was flanked by 2 others who moved with the heavy grace of predators. They did not stop at the front desk. They walked straight to the elevators. I adjusted the focus on the binoculars. I watched Gavin. He was still on the phone, spinning in his chair. Then the door to his office burst open. Gavin jumped up, dropping the phone. He smiled at first, extending a hand, thinking they were there to celebrate or discuss the next deal. The man in the suit did not shake his hand. He slapped Gavin across the face so hard that Gavin spun around and fell onto his desk, scattering papers everywhere. The 2 muscle men grabbed him. They hauled him up by his expensive lapels. They didn't beat him in the office where the glass walls revealed everything to the street. They dragged him. I watched them pull my son-in-law out of his office and into the stairwell exit. I lowered the binoculars. "They are taking him to the roof," Mike said, watching with his naked eyes. "That is where they do business." We waited. 10 minutes passed. Then the stairwell door on the roof of Gavin's building opened. They threw him out onto the gravel. Gavin was a mess. His shirt was torn. His nose was bleeding freely, staining his white collar crimson. He was on his knees, begging. I could see his hands clasped together in supplication. The man in the suit threw the photocopy of the trust document onto the ground in front of Gavin. Gavin looked at it. He froze. I saw his shoulders slump. He realized the game was up. He realized that the deed he had given them was worthless paper. The man in the suit kicked Gavin in the ribs. Gavin curled into a ball. The man leaned down. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language perfectly. He held up 1 finger, then 2, then 4, 24 hours. He pointed at the document, then pointed at Gavin's head. The message was clear. Fix the paperwork, get the real signature, get the biometric thumbprint, validate the deed, or we will come back and we will not leave a body for the police to find. The Russians turned and left. They left Gavin lying in the gravel, sobbing, holding his broken ribs. He lay there for a long time. Then slowly, painfully, he pulled himself up. He was frantic now. He was a rat in a burning cage. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He started making calls. I could see him screaming into the device, pacing back and forth on the roof, limping. He wasn't calling the police. He was calling the only places that might have the solution to his problem. He was calling the hospitals. He was calling the spa. He needed Lucius Coleman. He needed the man he had declared a vegetable. He needed me to wake up, to walk into a lawyer's office and to put my thumb on a scanner. I sat in the truck and watched him panic. It was a cold satisfaction. He had tried to erase me, and now I was the only thing that could save his life. My burner phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was Naya. She hadn't called to apologize. She hadn't called to ask if I was alive. She was calling because Gavin had just called her screaming that the deal had collapsed and that men with guns were coming for them. I let it ring. I let her sweat. I let the reality of her choices sink in. It stopped ringing. Then a text message appeared. "Daddy, please pick up. Gavin is hurt." Some men came to his office. They say the deed is no good. They say they need your fingerprint. "Daddy, they said they are going to kill us. Please, Daddy, I am scared. They know where we live." I read the message. I read the fear in the pixels. She wasn't scared for me. She was scared for herself. She was realizing that being a partner to a con man meant sharing his debts and his enemies. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. "I am not in a coma, Nia." I hit send. The phone rang instantly. She didn't wait. "Daddy," she screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. "Oh God, Daddy, where are you? You have to help us." Gavin made a mistake. It was just a mistake. The paperwork was wrong. You have to come sign the real deed. If you don't sign it tonight, they are going to come to the house. Gavin didn't make a mistake, Nia. I said, my voice flat. He committed fraud. He sold land that didn't belong to him to people who don't sue. "Daddy, stop lecturing me," she shrieked. "He is bleeding. He is terrified. We need you. You are my father. You have to protect me." "I protected you for 35 years, Nia," I said. "I protected you from the cold. I protected you from hunger. I protected you from debt, and you repaid me by signing a paper to lock me in a room until I died." "I am sorry," she sobbed, but it sounded hollow. "I am so sorry, Daddy." I was confused. Gavin told me it was for the best. I will never do it again. Just come sign the paper. Please, just save us. She still didn't get it. She thought this was a negotiation. She thought she could trade a sorry for a $3 million asset. "I am not signing anything, Nia," I said. "Then we are dead," she whispered. "They gave him 24 hours, but they said if he doesn't have the signature by midnight, they are going to start with me." Midnight. That was 4 hours away. "Where is Gavin now?" I asked. "He is getting cleaned up," she said. "We have to go to the gala. We have to make an appearance. If we don't show up, people will ask questions. The investors will panic. He says we have to act normal until we fix this." The gala. Of course. The narcissist couldn't let go of his stage even when the theater was burning down. He thought he could charm his way out of a death sentence. He thought if he put on a tuxedo and smiled, the wolves would back off. "I will be there," I said. "What?" she asked, her voice full of confusion and hope. "You will come to the party." "I will be there, Nia," I said. "Tell Gavin to have the papers ready. Tell him to have the notary ready." "Oh, thank you, Daddy, thank you," she cried. "I knew you wouldn't let us down. I knew you loved me. We will meet you there. The ballroom at the Ritz. 8 o'clock. Please hurry." I hung up. I looked at Big Mike. "She thinks I am coming to sign," I said. "And what are you going to do?" Mike asked, checking the cylinder of the revolver one last time. "I am going to sign," I said. "But not the paper they think." I looked at the copy of the medical report Nia had filed with the court, the one Keisha had saved, the one that declared me mentally incompetent. Nia had forged a sword to cut my throat. She didn't realize that a sword has 2 edges, and tonight she was going to fall on the one she sharpened herself. "Drive, Mike," I said. "Let us go to the ball." We pulled out of the parking structure. The city lights were bright below us, a sea of artificial stars. Somewhere in that grid, Gavin Sterling was putting on a fresh shirt, covering his bruises with makeup, and preparing to play the role of the successful tycoon one last time. He was expecting a savior. He was expecting a beaten, broken old man to limp in and sign away his legacy to save his ungrateful daughter. He was going to get the engineer, and I was bringing a wrecking ball. I stood in the bathroom of the garage, staring at the stranger in the cracked mirror. The man looking back at me was wild. His eyes were rimmed with red and his face was covered in a week of gray stubble and grime. I looked like the homeless man they wanted me to be. I looked like a victim. But victims do not win wars. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face, washing away the dirt of the storm drain and the sweat of the chase. I picked up the razor Mike had given me. The blade was cold against my skin. I scraped away the gray beard stroke by stroke, revealing the jawline I had inherited from my father. I watched Lucius Coleman emerge from the filth. He looked older than I remembered, and his eyes were harder, but he was there. I dressed in the back office. Mike had called a favor from a cousin who ran a funeral home, and they had delivered a black suit that smelled faintly of mothballs and cedar. It fit well enough. I tied the tie with steady hands, knotting the silk tight against my throat. I looked at my reflection. I didn't look like a confused old man anymore. I looked like a man who had come to settle a debt. Big Mike was waiting for me by the truck. He had squeezed his massive frame into a dark suit that strained at the shoulders, making him look like a mountain dressed for a wedding. Keisha was there too, wearing a simple black dress she had pulled from her bag. She looked terrified, but when she saw me, she straightened her spine. "You look like a boss," Mr. Coleman, Mike said, handing me a cane to help with my broken ankle. "I am not a boss, Mike," I said, gripping the handle of the cane. "I am a father who has to go discipline his children." We left the rusted truck at the garage and took Mike's other car, a clean black Lincoln Town Car that he usually rented out for funerals. It was fitting. We were going to a funeral after all, even if the guest of honor didn't know it yet. The drive to the Ritz-Carlton was silent. The city lights blurred past the windows. I checked the pocket of my jacket. I had the medical report, I had the copy of the trust, and I had the burner phone. We pulled up to the valet stand. The entrance was crowded with photographers and well-dressed guests. Gavin had spared no expense. He needed this gala to be a success to convince his creditors he was still a player. I stepped out of the car. My bad ankle protested, but I leaned on the cane, turning the limp into a dignified strut. Mike stepped out behind me, his presence a silent threat to anyone who thought about stopping us. Keisha walked by my side, clutching my arm, not for support, but for courage. We walked through the double doors and into the ballroom. The noise of the party hit us first, a wall of chatter and clinking glass and string quartet music. Then the silence hit. It started at the door and rippled outward like a wave as people turned and saw me. The chatter died. The music faltered and stopped. Hundreds of eyes locked onto me. I saw confusion. I saw shock. I saw the cameras flash blinding white explosions that captured the return of the man who was supposed to be in a coma. Then I saw them. Gavin and Nia were standing near the stage, holding champagne flutes, holding court. They looked up. Nia dropped her glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. For a second, nobody moved. Then the performance began. Daddy Nia screamed, her voice breaking into a perfect sob of relief. She ran toward me, her heels clicking on the floor. She threw her arms around me, burying her face in my chest. It looked like love. It looked like a daughter overjoyed to see her missing father, but I felt her body trembling. I felt her nails digging into my back. "You are alive," she whispered into my ear, her voice a hiss of pure venom. "You were supposed to be dead. Why didn't you just die?" I stood rigid. I didn't hug her back. I let her cling to me like a parasite. "I missed you too, Nia," I said, loud enough for the cameras to hear. Gavin was right behind her. He had covered the bruises on his face with heavy makeup, but I could see the swelling around his eyes. He grabbed my hand, pumping it enthusiastically, playing the part of the grateful son-in-law. "Lucius, thank God," Gavin exclaimed, his eyes darting around the room, checking the exits, checking the crowd. "We were so worried. We thought we lost you." He pulled me into a hug, clapping me on the back. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here, old man," he whispered, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and fear. "You just signed your death warrant." He pulled back, smiling for the cameras. "Get him a chair," Gavin shouted to a waiter. "My father-in-law is frail. He needs to sit down." They ushered me toward a VIP table near the stage, away from the exit, away from the cameras. Mike and Keisha tried to follow, but security guards stepped in their path, blocking them. I caught Mike's eye and gave a small nod. He stayed back, crossing his arms, waiting. Gavin sat me down. He pulled his chair close to mine, so close our knees touched. He leaned in, smiling like we were sharing a private joke. Under the table, I felt something sharp press against my ribs. I looked down. Gavin had a switchblade in his hand, hidden beneath a napkin. The blade was pressing into the side of my jacket, right over my kidney. "You are going to fix this, Lucius," he whispered, his smile never wavering. "You are going to go up on that stage. The notary is waiting behind the curtain. You are going to sign the confirmation of sale for the south lot. You are going to tell everyone that you authorized the sale weeks ago and that your disappearance was just a misunderstanding due to your medication." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. "And if I don't, I asked calmly. He pressed the knife harder. I felt the point pierce the fabric of my suit. "If you don't, I will kill you right here," he said. "I have nothing left to lose, Lucius. But that is not the worst part. Look at your daughter." I looked at Nia. She was standing a few feet away accepting tissues from a sympathetic guest crying fake tears. "There is a man standing by the kitchen door," Gavin said. "He is holding a flask. It is not whiskey. It is sulfuric acid. If you do not walk up those stairs and sign that paper in the next 5 minutes, I will give him the signal. He will throw it in Nia's face." I stared at him. He was willing to disfigure his own wife, his partner in crime, just to secure a signature. "She helped you," I said. "She betrayed me for you." "She is a tool," Gavin sneered, "and tools are replaceable. Money is not. Do we have a deal, old man, or do you want to see your daughter melt?" I looked past him toward the back of the room. At a table in the shadows sat 3 men. They were not drinking. They were not talking. They were watching us. One of them, the man in the suit I had seen at the warehouse, raised his glass slightly in a toast. They were here, the executioners. They were waiting for their money or their blood. I looked back at Gavin. I saw the terror behind his eyes. He was a cornered rat willing to bite anything to survive. I looked at Nia. She was looking at me now, her eyes pleading. She didn't know about the acid. She just knew that her life was balancing on a razor's edge. I took a deep breath. I felt the engineer take over completely. I calculated the variables. I calculated the structural failure. "You win, Gavin," I said. He let out a breath he had been holding. The knife pressure eased slightly. "Good choice," he said. "Smart choice." "I will sign," I said. "Just get me to the microphone. I want to tell them how good you have been to me." Gavin stood up, buttoning his jacket. He offered me his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming across the hall. "My father-in-law would like to say a few words." I took his hand. I used it to pull myself up. I leaned heavily on my cane. We walked toward the stairs. The spotlight hit us blinding and hot. I was walking to my doom. Or so he thought. I climbed the steps. I stood behind the podium. The microphone hummed. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the investors. I saw the press. I saw the Russians in the back. Gavin stood right next to me, his hand on my shoulder, the knife back in his pocket, but his threat hanging heavy in the air. The notary stepped forward with the deed on a clipboard. I looked at the paper. I looked at Gavin. He nodded, his eyes manic. I leaned into the microphone. "My son-in-law wants me to sign this paper," I said, my voice booming through the speakers. "He wants me to sign over the land my wife and I bought 40 years ago." The crowd clapped politely, thinking this was a touching tribute. I reached into my inner pocket. Gavin flinched, his hand twitching toward his pocket. But I didn't pull out a pen. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. The medical report Nia had filed that morning. "But I'm afraid I cannot sign," I said, my voice hardening. "Because according to this medical report filed with the Superior Court by my daughter Nia Sterling at 9 o'clock this morning, I am suffering from stage 4 dementia, and I am legally incompetent to sign any contract." The room went silent. So I continued looking directly at the Russians in the back. "Any signature I put on this paper today is legally void. It is worthless. Just like the deal my son-in-law made with you." Gavin's hand fell from my shoulder. I turned to look at him. The blood had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse that had forgotten to fall down. I had just told the mob that he had scammed them again, and I had done it using his own lies as the weapon. The spotlight hit me like a physical blow, blinding and white-hot. It washed out the faces of the crowd, turning the ballroom into a sea of faceless shadows. I stood at the podium, gripping the polished wood with hands that felt too old and too tired, but steadier than they had been in days. Beside me, Gavin Sterling was practically vibrating with nervous energy. He radiated a heat that smelled of expensive cologne and desperate sweat. He thrust the heavy microphone into my hand and then slid the clipboard across the slanted surface of the podium. The deed to the south lot sat there crisp and waiting. Next to it was a heavy gold fountain pen, the cap already unscrewed. Gavin smiled at the crowd, a wide, winning smile that didn't reach his dead eyes. He looked like the philanthropist of the year, the dutiful son-in-law helping his frail elder. But his hand rested on my shoulder and his thumb dug into my trapezius muscle, a silent reminder of the knife in his pocket and the man with the acid standing near my daughter. "Sign it!" he hissed through his teeth, his voice too low for the microphone to pick up, but loud enough to echo in my ear like a gunshot. "Sign it and be the hero, Lucius. or be the reason Naya loses her face. I looked down at the paper. It was a standard transfer of deed gifting the property to the Sterling Foundation, which was just a shell company for his laundering operation. I looked at the notary standing just off stage, a woman who looked bored and ready to stamp whatever was put in front of her. I looked at Gavin. He gave me a curt nod, his eyes manic, urging me on. He thought he had won. He thought the fear had broken me. He thought the engineer had crumbled under the pressure of the collapse. He didn't understand that when a structure is about to fail, you don't patch it with tape. You let it fall exactly where you planned it to. I pulled the microphone closer. The feedback whine pierced the room for a split second, silencing the last murmurs of the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice was gravel and dust, but it boomed through the speakers, filling the cavernous room. Gavin squeezed my shoulder harder, a warning. "Stick to the script, old man." "My son-in-law, Gavin Sterling, brought me up here to do something very important tonight," I continued. "He has told you all about his vision for the city. He has told you about his charity, and he has told you that I am here to support that vision by donating the most valuable asset my late wife Beatrice and I ever owned, the South Lot." A ripple of polite applause moved through the room. Gavin relaxed slightly. His chest puffed out. He released his grip on my shoulder just a fraction. He thought I was folding. He thought I was giving the concession speech. I looked out into the darkness past the lights. I found the table in the back where the three men in dark suits sat, the Russians. They weren't clapping. They were watching Gavin like sharks circling a wounded seal. They were waiting for their payday. "This land means everything to my family," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the darkness. "It represents 40 years of labor. It represents the sweat I poured into concrete foundations and the nights my wife spent balancing ledgers. Gavin tells me that selling this land will solve all his problems. He tells me it is the only way to secure the future." Gavin chuckled nervously, leaning toward the mic. "My father-in-law is a sentimental man," he joked to the crowd, "but he knows that progress requires sacrifice. Go ahead, Lucius. Make it official." He tapped the pen against the clipboard. The sound was a sharp tick-tick-tick. I picked up the pen. Gavin let out a breath he had been holding. The notary stepped forward, ready to witness the signature that would transfer $3 million of equity into the hands of the mob. I held the pen over the paper. The tip hovered millimeters from the signature line. "But there is a problem," I said. My voice dropped an octave, losing the warmth, becoming cold and hard as steel. Gavin froze. The smile didn't leave his face, but it turned brittle like cracked glass. "What problem, Lucius? Just sign the damn paper," he whispered. I put the pen down. I didn't sign. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Gavin flinched. His hand twitched toward his own pocket, toward the knife. He thought I was pulling a weapon. He was ready to stab me right there on stage in front of 500 witnesses. But I didn't pull a gun. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was crinkled and stained with the dampness of the storm drain, but the official seal of the Superior Court was clearly visible. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately. The microphone picked up the rustle of the paper, amplifying it until it sounded like a fire crackling. "I cannot sign this deed," I said, my voice ringing out with absolute clarity. "I cannot sign it because, according to my son-in-law and my daughter, I am not a person anymore." The room went deadly silent. The waiter stopped moving. The applause died instantly. I held the paper up to the light. "This morning at 9 o'clock, my daughter, Nia Sterling, filed this document with the county court I read. Docket number 742, emergency petition for guardianship. Attached to it is a medical affidavit signed by Dr. Aris of the Serenity Wellness Center." I looked at Gavin. He was pale. His mouth was opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He knew what was coming. He saw the beam cracking. He heard the rivets popping. According to this sworn statement, which my son-in-law paid for and my daughter signed, I, Lucius Coleman, am suffering from stage 4 aggressive dementia, I read. It states that I am confused, paranoid, and lack the mental capacity to make financial or legal decisions. It states that I am a danger to myself and others. It states that I am legally incompetent. I lowered the paper and looked at the notary. She had taken a step back, clutching her stamp to her chest, looking terrified. "Miss," I asked her, "can you notarize the signature of a man who has been declared legally incompetent by a court of law?" She shook her head vigorously. "No, sir. Absolutely not. That would be fraud." I turned back to the microphone. "There you have it," I said, addressing the room, addressing the cameras, and most importantly, addressing the men in the back. "Under the laws of this state, any contract signed by a person deemed mentally incapacitated is void, AB, Initio. It is worthless. It is just ink on paper. I turned to Gavin. He looked like he had been hollowed out. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was the terror of a man who realized he had built a trap and walked right into it. You wanted me crazy, Gavin. I said, my voice soft now just for him. You wanted me incompetent so you could steal my life. Well, you got your wish. I am crazy. I am so crazy that my signature isn't worth the paper it is written on. I picked up the deed, the one he needed to pay the Russians, the one that was his lifeline. I ripped it in half. The sound of the tearing paper was the loudest thing in the room. I ripped it again and again until it was just confetti. I let the pieces fall to the floor at Gavin's feet. You can't sell the land, Gavin, I said, and you can't get the money, and you can't pay your friends in the back. I pointed to the table in the shadows. The three men stood up. The movement was synchronized, fluid, and terrifying. The man in the suit buttoned his jacket. He didn't look at me. He looked at Gavin. He looked at Gavin with the expression of a butcher looking at a side of beef. Gavin saw them. He saw his death standing up in the back of the room. He made a sound, a high-pitched whimper that the microphone caught and broadcast to everyone. He looked at me. He looked at the confetti on the floor. He looked at the knife in his pocket, but he knew it was useless against the men coming for him. He lunged for the microphone, desperate to salvage the narrative, desperate to spin another lie. He is lying. Gavin screamed, his voice cracking. He is fine. He is lying. The medical report is a mistake. He is sane. Let him sign. But it was too late. The notary was already walking away. The investors were whispering, checking their phones. The spell was broken. And then the table in the back flipped over. It wasn't a figure of speech. One of the Russian muscle men flipped the heavy round table, sending glasses and plates crashing to the floor. It was a signal. It was the end of the grace period. Gavin stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. He fell onto the stage, crawling backward, away from the crowd, away from the truth. He looked at Nia. She was standing by the kitchen door, frozen. The man with the flask had vanished, melting away the moment the plan collapsed. Nia was alone. She looked at her husband on the floor, and she didn't move to help him. She looked at me, and I saw the realization hit her. She had bet on the wrong horse, and now the race was over. Gavin didn't stay on the floor for long. The survival instinct of a cornered animal is a powerful thing, and it surged through him now, overriding the shame and the shock. He scrambled up, his tuxedo jacket torn at the shoulder, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He looked at the confetti on the floor, the shredded deed that was supposed to save his life, and then he looked at me. His eyes weren't human anymore. They were wide, white-rimmed orbs of terror. He let out a scream that sounded like tearing metal. "You ruin everything," he shrieked, lunging toward me. "You senile old bat, you ruin everything." He wasn't reaching for me. He was reaching for the microphone. He thought if he could just get his voice back into the speakers, he could spin this. He could tell them I was having an episode. He could tell them I was violent. He could shout over the truth until it drowned. He grabbed the stand, wrestling it from my grip. His fingernails dug into my hand, drawing blood. He was young and he was desperate, and for a second I thought he might actually throw me off the stage. But he forgot about the mountain standing in the shadows. Big Mike didn't run. He didn't shout. He just moved. He stepped out from behind the velvet curtain where he had been waiting, a dark shape moving with surprising speed for a man of his size. He didn't use a weapon. He didn't need one. As Gavin pulled the microphone back to his mouth, Mike stepped into his space. He planted his feet on the hardwood stage. He drew his fist back short and tight. The sound was sickening. It was a wet thud, like a butcher dropping a side of beef onto a cutting board. Mike drove his fist into Gavin's solar plexus, burying it deep. Gavin didn't scream. He couldn't. The air was forced out of his lungs in a sharp, explosive whoosh. His eyes bugged out. He folded around Mike's fist like a wet towel. He dropped to his knees, clutching his stomach, his mouth opening and closing, silently gasping for air that wouldn't come. The microphone clattered to the floor, rolling away with a hollow thumping sound that was picked up by the speakers and broadcast to the stunned room. I looked down at him. I didn't feel pity. I felt the cold satisfaction of an engineer seeing a faulty structure finally collapse under its own weight. "Stay down," Gavin Mike rumbled, standing over him like a statue of judgment. "Before you break something you can't fix." But the demolition wasn't over. I nodded to the back of the room where Elias Strickland was standing by the audio-visual booth. Elias adjusted his glasses and signaled the technician. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the logo of the Sterling Foundation, flickered. The image distorted, shifting into static before snapping into focus. It wasn't a polished charity video. It was grainy, shaky footage taken from a cell phone hidden under a desk. Keisha's video. The audio boomed through the ballroom, clear and loud. "Just sign the paper." Old man Gavin's voice on the video was dripping with cruelty. "No, you don't need to read it. If you don't sign it, you don't get your pain medication. Do you want to hurt all night?" On the screen, a frail, elderly man in a hospital gown was weeping, shaking his head. Gavin grabbed the man's hand and forced the pen into it, slamming it down onto the paper. "Sign it, or I will have the orderly tie you down." The crowd in the ballroom gasped. It was a collective sound of horror. They were watching the man they had toasted 5 minutes ago torture a helpless senior citizen. Then the image changed. It was a still photo of Nia, but the audio was a voicemail. A voicemail she had left for Gavin 3 days ago. "I don't care if it hurts him." Gavin Nia's voice rang out shrill and impatient. "Just get it done. He is useless to us alive. He is just sitting on that money while we suffer. If he has a heart attack at the spa, so be it. It is a mercy, really. Just make sure the policy pays out." I looked at Nia. She was standing by the kitchen doors, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She wasn't horrified by what she had said. She was horrified that the world was hearing it. She looked around the room, seeing her friends, her social climbing rivals, the people she had tried so hard to impress. They were looking at her with disgust. They were looking at her like she was a monster. She backed away, shaking her head, mouthing the word no over and over, but the audio continued, relentless and damning. "I hate him," Nia's voice said. "I hate his dirty fingernails. I hate his stories about the old days. He is an anchor, Gavin. Cut the chain. Let him sink." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Then the chaos broke. It started with a single scream from a woman in the front row. Then the spell shattered. The guests realized they were in the middle of a crime scene. They realized they were applauding predators. People began to run. Expensive chairs were knocked over. Wine glasses shattered on the floor. It was a stampede of silk and tuxedos. The press photographers, who had been stunned into inaction, suddenly woke up. Shutters clicked furiously, a strobe light effect of blinding flashes, capturing Gavin on his knees, gasping for air, capturing Nia, cowering by the door, capturing me, standing tall on the stage, leaning on my cane. They smelled blood in the water. This wasn't just a society page story anymore. This was the scandal of the decade. Gavin looked up. He saw the cameras. He saw his reputation incinerating in real time. But then he saw something much worse. He looked toward the back of the room. The table where the Russians had been sitting was empty. They were gone. They hadn't attacked. They hadn't made a scene. They had simply stood up and walked out the back exit. Gavin knew what that meant. I knew what that meant. If they had beaten him here, he might have survived. A beating is a warning. But walking away meant the contract was closed. It meant he was a liability. It meant they weren't going to collect the money anymore. They were going to collect the life insurance policy they likely held on him. Gavin let out a sound that wasn't human. It was the keen of a man who sees the Reaper standing in the doorway. He scrambled to his feet, stumbling, his coordination gone. He looked at the exit where the Russians had left. He couldn't go that way. He looked at the front entrance where the press was blocking the path. He couldn't go that way. He was trapped. He was bankrupt. He was exposed. And he was marked for death. He looked at me. His eyes were wild, spinning with madness. "You did this!" he screamed, spitting blood. "You killed me! You old fool! You killed us all!" He reached into his jacket. I saw the movement. Mike saw it too. "He is going for the knife," Mike shouted, stepping forward to shield me. But Gavin didn't pull the knife. The knife was a tool for threats. The knife was for control. Gavin was past control. He was in the realm of pure survival instinct. He pulled a gun. It was a compact semi-automatic, black and sleek, a holdout weapon. He must have had it in his waistband the whole time. He didn't aim it at me. He didn't aim it at Mike. He swept it across the room, aiming at the crowd, aiming at the cameras, aiming at anything that moved. "Get back!" he screamed. "Everyone, get back!" The screaming in the room intensified. Guests dove under tables. Waiters dropped trays. The panic was total. Sirens wailed outside. They were close, loud. I had called them 10 minutes before I walked onto the stage. I had told them there was a hostage situation in progress. I had told them there was an armed man. I had set the stage for this finale. The double doors at the main entrance burst open. Police dropped the weapon. 6 officers in tactical gear swarmed into the room, rifles raised. They fanned out, taking positions behind pillars and overturned tables. Gavin spun around, aiming the gun at the police. "No!" he screamed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood from his nose. "I am not going to prison. I can't go to prison. They will kill me inside." He was right. The Russians had reach. Prison wouldn't save him. The street wouldn't save him. He had nowhere to go. He looked at Nia. She was crouched by the wall, sobbing. "Naya, get over here!" he shouted, waving the gun at her. "Get over here now!" She shook her head, terrified. "Gavin, please put it down. You stupid cow, get over here!" he roared. "You are my ticket out of here." He wasn't looking at her as a wife. He was looking at her as a human shield. He took a step toward her. The police shouted warnings. "Drop it! Drop the gun!" Gavin didn't drop it. He grabbed Naya by the hair, dragging her up from the floor. He jammed the barrel of the gun against her temple. "Back off," he screamed at the police, saliva flying from his mouth. "Back off, or I will paint the wall with her brains. I swear to God I will do it. She is worth nothing to me anyway." The room froze. The only sound was Nia's whimpering. I stood on the stage looking down at them. I looked at the man who had tried to murder me, holding a gun to the head of the daughter who had betrayed me. I should have felt victory. I had exposed them. I had destroyed them. But looking at Nia, seeing the absolute terror in her eyes, seeing the realization that the man she had sold her father for was about to kill her, I didn't feel victory. I felt a profound, hollow sadness. But I also felt the engineer. The situation was unstable, the load was too heavy, a collapse was imminent, and I was the only one who could control the direction of the fall. I stepped forward to the edge of the stage. I raised my cane, not as a weapon, but as a signal. "Gavin," I said, my voice calm, cutting through the tension. "Look at me." He turned his head slightly, the gun still pressed to Nia's head. "What do you want, old man?" he spat. "You want to watch her die." "No, Gavin," I said. "I want to make a deal." "There are no deals," he screamed. "It is over." "It is not over," I said. "I have the trust. I can unlock it. I can sign the paper. I can give you the land." He hesitated. Greed flickered in his eyes, warring with the fear. "You said you couldn't," he said. "You said you were incompetent." "I lied," I said. "I am the executor. I can override the medical report. I can give you the deed right now. Just let her go." It was a lie, a bold, desperate lie. I couldn't override anything. But Gavin didn't know the law. He only knew greed. He looked at me. He looked at the police. He looked at Nia. "Bring it here," he snarled. "Bring the deed. And if anyone shoots, she dies." I stepped off the stage. My broken ankle screamed, but I walked. I walked toward the man with the gun. I walked toward my daughter. I was walking into the line of fire. But I wasn't going there to save them. I was going there to end it. The ballroom had transformed into a cage of gold leaf and crystal where the air smelled of terror and expensive perfume. The music was gone, replaced by the screaming of sirens outside and the heavy breathing of the man holding a gun to my daughter's head. Gavin Sterling stood with his back to the mirrored wall, dragging Nia with him like a rag doll. His eyes were darting around the room, scanning the perimeter of police officers who had their weapons trained on his chest. He was sweating profuse sweat that cut through his makeup and dripped onto his ruined tuxedo shirt. "Back off!" he screamed, his voice cracking with the hysteria of a man watching his own funeral. "I want a helicopter on the roof in 10 minutes. I want flight clearance. And I want $5 million in bearer bonds or cryptocurrency transferred to my secure wallet. If I see a single laser sight on my chest, I am going to open her skull right here." It was a ridiculous demand. It was the demand of a man who had watched too many movies and lived too little real life. Helicopters do not land on the roofs of hotels in the middle of a metropolitan city on 10 minutes' notice. Bearer bonds are a myth from the 80s. He was flailing, grabbing at fantasies because reality was a prison cell. Nia was sobbing a low, continuous keen of pure misery. Her makeup was smeared across her face in black streaks. Her designer dress was torn at the shoulder where Gavin gripped her. She looked small. She looked like a child who had woken up in a nightmare and couldn't find the light switch. Gavin dragged her toward the service entrance, moving away from the main doors where the SWAT team was stacking up. He pressed the barrel of the pistol harder into her temple. I could see the skin whiten under the pressure. His finger was trembling on the trigger. He didn't have trigger discipline. He didn't have training. That made him infinitely more dangerous than a professional. A professional kills when necessary. An amateur kills by accident because his hand shakes. I stood 10 feet away, leaning on my cane, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I calculated the distance. I calculated the angle. If I lunged, he would shoot her before I covered half the distance. "You are not getting a helicopter, Gavin," I said, my voice calm and low, cutting through the panic. "There is no roof access. The elevators are locked. You are in a box." "Shut up, old man," he roared, spraying saliva. "You did this. You trapped me. I need a way out." He jerked Nia violently. She stumbled her high heels, slipping on the polished floor. She cried out a sharp sound of pain. "Gavin, baby, please!" She begged, her voice wet with tears. "You are hurting me. It is me. It is Nia. Just stop. We can talk to them. We can fix this. Just put the gun down." She still thought she was his wife. She still thought there was a we. She was clinging to the delusion that this was just a terrible misunderstanding, a business deal gone wrong that could be smoothed over with the right words and a good lawyer. Gavin looked down at her. He didn't look at her with love. He didn't look at her with regret. He looked at her with a sneer of absolute disgust. "Shut your mouth," he hissed. "Gavin, please," she sobbed, reaching up to touch his arm. "I love you. Do not do this." He slapped her. It wasn't a backhand. It was a pistol whip. He swung the heavy metal slide of the gun against her cheekbone. The sound was a wet crack that echoed in the silence of the room. Nia screamed, falling to her knees, her hand flying to her face. Blood started to seep through her fingers, dark and fast. "Shut up," I said. "Shut up, you stupid cow." Gavin screamed, his voice turning into a demonic shriek. "You are useless. You have always been useless." Nia looked up at him from the floor, her eyes wide with shock. The physical pain was nothing compared to the words, what she whispered. "You heard me," he spat. "You are nothing but a drain. You are stupid, and you are vain, and you are slow. If you weren't so incompetent, I would have had the money months ago. I told you to get the power of attorney last year. I told you to switch his pills sooner, but you were too weak. You wanted to play the good daughter. You wanted to keep your hands clean." He kicked her in the thigh. She gasped, curling into a ball. I had to do everything, Gavin ranted, pacing in a tight semicircle around her, keeping the gun trained on her head. I had to find the forger. I had to hire the doctor. I had to set up the sale. All you did was spend the money I stole. You are a parasite, Nia, and now you are dead weight. Nia stared at him. The illusion shattered. The glass house she had built her life in exploded, raining shards down on her soul. She realized in that terrible moment that he had never loved her, not for a second. He had loved her credit score before he ruined it. He had loved her father's assets. He had loved her compliance, but he had never loved her. She was just a tool he had used to pry open a safe, and now that the safe was empty, he was going to discard the tool. She slumped against the wall, the fight going out of her. She looked broken. Not just injured, but spiritually destroyed. She looked at me. Her eyes were empty holes. She didn't ask for help. She didn't think she deserved it. I looked at the man who had destroyed my family. I looked at the daughter who had betrayed me and was now paying the ultimate price for her treachery. I should have walked away. I should have let this police handle it. I should have let karma finish the job I started. But I couldn't. The engineer in me saw a structural failure, but the father in me saw my child bleeding on the floor. It didn't matter what she had done. It didn't matter that she had signed my death warrant. She was my blood. And no one spills my blood but me. I stepped forward. I let my cane drop to the floor. It clattered loudly, drawing Gavin's eyes to me. I raised my hands slowly, palms open, showing I was unarmed. "Let her go, Gavin," I said. He swung the gun toward me, then back to Nia, his eyes wild. "Stay back, Lucius. I will kill her. I swear I will kill her. She is worthless to you," I said, keeping my voice steady, hypnotic. "You said it yourself. She is stupid. She is weak. She has no authority. She can't sign the trust documents. She can't give you the land." He hesitated. He looked at Nia, huddled on the floor, a mess of blood and tears. "So, what?" he snarled. "She is a hostage." "She is my shield." "She is a bad shield," I said, taking another step. She is hysterical. She is injured. She is going to slow you down. If you try to drag her out of here, she will trip. She will faint, and the snipers will take the shot the moment she falls." Gavin looked at the police line. He saw the truth in my words. He was trying to escape with an anchor tied to his leg. "I am the asset, Gavin," I said. I tapped my chest. "I am the grantor of the trust. I am the only one with the biometric clearance. I am the only one who can walk into a bank and wire you $5 million. He stared at me, greed warring with suspicion in his eyes. "You said you were incompetent," he said. "You said your signature was void." "I lied," I said. "I lied to stop the sale. I lied to hurt you. But I can undo it. I can tell the police it was a family dispute. I can sign the transfer. I can get you the money you need to disappear." I took another step. I was 15 feet away. "Why would you do that?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "You hate me." "I do hate you," I said. "But she is my daughter. And despite everything, I don't want to watch her die. So trade her. Take me. I am the better hostage. I am the key to the vault. She is just a liability." The room held its breath. The police didn't fire. They were waiting to see if the trade would happen. They knew a hostage exchange was the best chance to get Nia out alive. Gavin looked at me. He looked at the confidence in my stance. He looked at Nia useless and broken on the floor. He did the math. He was a transactional man. He understood value. He lowered the gun slightly away from Nia's head, pointing it at the space between us. "Get over here," he barked. Slowly. Hands where I can see them. He was going to take the deal. He was going to trade the pawn for the king. I walked toward him. My ankle screamed with every step without the cane, but I didn't limp. I walked tall. I walked like a man going to a business meeting. I got within 5 feet. Gavin reached out with his free hand to grab my lapel, intending to pull me in as a shield and shove Nia away. But he made a mistake. He took his eyes off Nia for a split second. He forgot about her. He dismissed her as a threat because he had broken her spirit. But he hadn't accounted for rage. Nia was on the floor watching us. She heard me offer my life for hers after everything she had done to me. She heard him accept the trade, confirming that she was nothing to him. Something snapped inside her. It wasn't sanity. It was the primal fury of a woman who realizes she has been played for a fool her entire life. As Gavin reached for me, Nia lunged. She didn't scream. She didn't stand up. She launched herself from her crouch like a feral cat. She didn't go for his legs. She didn't go for the gun. She went for his hand, the hand holding the weapon. She clamped her teeth onto his wrist. She bit down with all the force of her jaw, tearing through skin and tendon, grinding her teeth against the bone. Gavin screamed a high-pitched sound of shock and agony. He tried to shake her off, but she held on, growling, shaking her head like a terrier with a rat. Blood sprayed from his wrist. The gun wavered. The barrel swung wildly, pointing at the ceiling, then the floor, then me. "Let go, you crazy bitch," Gavin shrieked, smashing the gun against her head, trying to dislodge her. But she didn't let go. She bit harder, fueled by the hate of 1,000 lies. I saw the gun swing toward my chest. I saw Gavin's fingers spasm on the trigger as the pain flared up his arm. I didn't have time to dodge. I didn't have time to think. I lunged forward, throwing my body into the space between the gun and my daughter. The deafening crack of the gunshot filled the room. The sound of the gunshot was not a bang. It was a physical concussion that sucked the air out of the room. I felt the impact before I heard the noise. It hit my left shoulder high up near the collarbone. It felt like someone had swung a sledgehammer against my chest. The force of it spun me around and my legs tangled in my own feet, sending me crashing to the polished floor. My vision went white at the edges. A burning heat spread down my arm, soaking my shirt. I lay there staring up at the crystal chandelier, trying to remember how to breathe. I was 72 years old and I had just taken a bullet for a woman who had signed a paper to have me locked away until I died. Chaos erupted above me. Big Mike did not hesitate when the gun went off. He moved with the terrifying momentum of a freight train. He hit Gavin Sterling just as the recoil kicked the gun up. Mike did not tackle him. He pulverized him. He drove his shoulder into Gavin midsection, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the mirrored wall. The glass shattered, raining shards down on them like diamonds. Gavin hit the floor and Mike was on top of him instantly. I heard the sickening crunch of bone as Mike twisted Gavin's arm behind his back until the shoulder popped. Gavin screamed a high, thin sound that was cut short as Mike drove his knee into Gavin's spine, pinning him to the ground like a butterfly on a board. Police officers swarmed over them. They kicked the gun away, sliding it across the floor. They dragged Mike off Gavin, shouting commands. But Mike went willingly. He raised his hands, stepping back, his job done. I tried to sit up. The pain in my shoulder flared hot and sharp, but I gritted my teeth. I had to see it. I had to see the end. Medics were running toward me now. "Sir, stay down," one of them shouted. I waved him off with my good hand. I pushed myself up to a sitting position, leaning against the stage. My suit was ruined. My blood was dark against the black fabric. I looked at Gavin. He was handcuffed, face pressed into the shards of glass. He was sobbing. He was begging. "It was her fault," he screamed, spitting blood. "She bit me. It was an accident. I didn't mean to shoot." He was still blaming everyone else. Even at the end, he could not take responsibility for the trigger he had pulled. Then I saw movement to my left. Nia was running toward me. She was a mess. Her face was smeared with blood from where Gavin had pistol whipped her. Her dress was torn. Her hair was wild. But she was alive. "Daddy," she cried, dropping to her knees beside me. "Oh God, Daddy, you are bleeding." She reached out to touch my shoulder, her hands trembling. "Help him," she screamed at the medics. "Help my father." I looked at her face. I saw the tears streaming down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the makeup and the blood. I saw the terror in her eyes. And for a heartbreaking second, I saw my little girl again. I saw the child who used to scrape her knee and run to me for a bandage. "I am so sorry, Daddy," she sobbed, reaching for my hand. "I am so sorry for everything. I didn't know he had a gun. I didn't know he would hurt you." She grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. Her skin was cold. "We can fix this," she whispered, leaning close, her voice frantic. "We can tell them he forced us. We can tell them he made us do it all. I will testify, Daddy. I will tell them everything you want to hear. Just please tell them I am a victim too. Tell them I saved you." I listened to her words. I felt the pressure of her hand, and then I felt the cold, hard knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with the bullet hole in my shoulder. She wasn't apologizing because she was sorry. She wasn't crying because I was hurt. She was crying because the ship was sinking and she was trying to climb onto my back to stay afloat. She wanted me to be her alibi. She wanted me to use my blood to wash her hands clean. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And I realized that the daughter I loved had died a long time ago. The woman in front of me was a stranger who shared her face. I pulled my hand away. It took effort. I was weak from the blood loss, but I ripped my hand from hers with a violence that made her flinch. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice was a rasp, low and guttural. "Daddy," she whimpered, reaching out again. I used my good arm to push her away. I shoved her back hard enough that she rocked on her heels and fell onto her side. I said, "Do not touch me," I growled. Nia stared at me, her mouth open in shock. She had never seen me look at her with anything but love. Now she was looking into the eyes of a stranger. "You signed the paper, Nia," I said, my voice rising, gaining strength from the anger. "You signed the petition to declare me incompetent. You signed the order to put me in a facility where you knew patients were dying." "Daddy, Gavin made me," she stammered. "Gavin didn't hold your hand when you signed," I said. "Gavin didn't make you call me selfish for saving my money. Gavin didn't make you leave me in that lobby to be erased. You did that, you." I struggled to my feet, pushing away the medic who tried to support me. I needed to stand. I needed to tower over her one last time. "You are crying now because the plan failed," I said, looking down at her. "You are crying because you lost the money. You are crying because you are afraid of prison. You are not crying for me." "Daddy, please," she begged, crawling toward me on her knees. "I am your daughter." "No," I said. "My daughter would never have sold my life for a penthouse. My daughter would never have looked at a man threatening to kill her father and worried about her inheritance. You are an accomplice, Nia. You are a co-conspirator, and you are a disappointment." The words hit her harder than Gavin's fist. She collapsed inward, sobbing into her hands, but I felt nothing. The well of sympathy had run dry. I had drained it to save her life, and now there was nothing left but dust. Detective Johnson stepped into the circle of light. He looked at me, then at Nia. He signaled to two officers standing nearby. Mrs. Sterling Johnson said, his voice flat and official, "Please stand up." Nia looked up confused. "I need to go with my father to the hospital," she said, wiping her nose. "He needs me." "Your father is in good hands," Mrs. Sterling Johnson said, "but you are not going to the hospital." He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted under the ballroom lights. "Nia Sterling, you are under arrest," the detective said. "Arrest!" Nia shrieked, scrambling back. "For what?" "I didn't shoot him. Gavin shot him. I am the victim. I was a hostage." You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, Johnson said, stepping forward and grabbing her wrist. You are under arrest for elder abuse, and you are under arrest for accessory to murder. Murder? Nia gasped. I didn't kill anyone. Not tonight, Johnson said, snapping the cuff onto her wrist. But we have the files from the Serenity Wellness Center. We have the testimony of the receptionist, Keisha. And we have the digital trail from your husband's laptop. Johnson pulled her up roughly